You're lending legitimacy to her arguments, and I don't understand why.
In what sense am I lending legitimacy to it?
Because you're saying, well, in Taylor's mind, centrists can be progressive. No, that's not true. She was just lying in that moment. She was just debate broing herself into a stupid position. Like you would agree that Taylor Lorenz, when she used that language, centrist, for Juliana, she was trying to communicate something to her readers with that label. You're really kind of stretching them and kind of making them meaningless. Well, anybody could be a moderate when you think about it, right? That's kind of what you're doing, right?
Terminology.
That is like running cover for her use of that language. Whether or not it's what you intended, that's what you're doing though. What I view what she did with her reporting after the fact and the way that she intentionally breathed oxygen into especially the Israel stuff, I thought that was morally like reprehensible.
To basically lambast,
to accuse
Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, and these creators,
all of them,
of being like shills and like covering up for genocide, essentially.
Yes.
That's the implication, right?
Yeah. I thought that was morally reprehensible. And so I don't know, it's hard for me to understand your instinct in that moment to not just let the bad faith just be more and more, expose itself more and more during that conversation. Instead, you jumped in to like try to help her with the argument. I think the biggest disagreement that you and I consistently have is you seem to take a view that the Democratic Party in a realistic ideal state would almost have like perfect unanimity. So like if you have 60 votes in the Senate, then you should expect 60 votes for each bill. Like you don't take it as far as Kyle does in terms of like bringing the IRS or the DOJ or something like that, but you get viscerally angry when there are 6 or 7 Democratic senators that are breaking from the party, whereas
on things,
I see it as something that you should expect. Like it's just a normal part of politics.
I think those are different things. Yeah, in terms of normalcy, in terms of it's expected, I don't think that I would dispute you that it's expected that you have some amount of holdouts in these kinds of legislations given the outcomes. I think that that's conflating a normative reaction, which is to say it shouldn't occur, with one about what you would normally expect, which I might not even dispute with you.
But I look at it like you say should it occur? What did you say, or is it
So question about whether
people should I agree, like we should have a public option or we should have this, but like when I think about those things, I don't get necessarily angry in the way that I think you do. I use that as like a guiding star, and I think it makes you like more angry.
So I separate in my head what's expected and what I think should occur. And sometimes when there's a disparity between what's expected and what should occur, it will cause me to be like angry, upset, or frustrated or whatever. Not always, but in some situations which I consider to be key indicators of things that matter to me. So for example, the future of the Democratic Party and where the leadership stands, I think when there is that mismatch between what should have occurred and what was likely to occur or what did occur, it does upset me. But usually it's on things that I care the most about. And maybe I usually am like, will not even mention it if it's something that I don't care about, right? It's almost like I understand the impression that I might give that I want unanimity or a unanimous Democratic caucus all the time, no matter what. But I think that impression sometimes is given extra force by the fact that I would only comment on things that matter to me. So in the context of the seven people who voted against let's do the Lake and
Riley bill. Let's do that one.
Lake and Riley Act. Yeah,
because both senators in Georgia voted for that bill, and when I saw that, I was like, well, that makes sense. It's like a very purple state, very different constituency. I might not even like the bill, but that doesn't really matter to me. So when I saw those votes, I was like, well, that makes sense. You saw those votes and you thought it was a betrayal. You thought it was,
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Right. So like, I think that for the Lake and Riley Act, I'm happy to, in general, be willing to deal on immigration matters. Like in the bipartisan border bill that Biden proposed, I'm gonna be honest with you. There's like a lot of provisions there that I don't agree with, but I was willing to say, you know what, that's fine.
Scaled back,
it's fine if we have some
asylum.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but in the context of the political outcome here, I'm fine with Democrats getting a compromise. I'm fine with letting some people vote against it and some people vote in favor of it. So it's not just the topic of immigration that I'm unwilling to deal on. Specifically with the Lake and Riley Act, this was about failing to meet the moment on Trump specifically, that and about what is contained in the Lake and Riley Act. The Lake and Riley Act gives additional forms of mandatory detention in the United States.
Right.
That is incredibly dangerous. And so detention power is one of the most dangerous powers, one of the most cherished things about our country is your literal protection from in terms of physical liberty. And giving the Trump administration a greater basis to claim mandatory detention authority, not on convictions of crimes, but on mere accusations, sometimes in concert with state actors. It was, in my opinion, just eminently foreseeable that mandatory detention issues is what we're going to be fighting on. And lo and behold, it was and is, right? In the context of the Trump administration, right now we have a circuit split on the mandatory detention provision contained in the INA, where it's like a massive, humongous big deal whether or not people are going to have access to like bond hearings. And so for me, in the context in which the Trump administration is like promising to go against rights, like we're about to see some of the worst immigration crackdowns and the deportation of of Kilmar Berger Garcia, all that stuff. It was so foreseeable. And I can't ever, I really can't deal on rights. When it comes to rights, that's not something I'm willing to deal with. And so because I viewed the mandatory detention issue there as a key to the like sort of looming fight that we're going to have with an authoritarian regime, I viewed it as conceding on rights, and I think it is
one of the
battle lines that we're having here. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. If we could devise a machine or a computer, some kind of algorithm that could tell you with 100% certainty that by voting for the Lakin Riley Act, Ossoff and Warnock 100% guaranteed that they would win re-election in their next election, would you?
Yeah, I would vote for it. Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting to me. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I'm willing to, like, in the sense that I say I'm not willing to deal, it's an exaggeration. Like, there are things that I'm willing to deal on when it comes to overall rights in this country. And so if you were to give me a time, like, yeah, I'm a consequentialist before I'm a deontologist when it comes to that, for sure. But part of the reason why I'm not upset about it is, that I am upset about it is I don't think that it was like a consequential vote that is a determiner about whether or not they're going to be elected or not. If I did have that notion, then I might think differently. So it's one where there's a high salience in terms of the issue for me, and where my intuition isn't that that this would have been necessary for their reelection, in part because I predicted that when Trump was going to institute these immigration things, that it wasn't going to become unpopular. And so I think that oftentimes Democrats are accused plausibly, and I mean this seriously, of like, yeah, have you ever heard the term? Have you played like soccer or anything? And it's like, go to where the ball's gonna be. Don't go to the ball. Like go where the ball's gonna be. And it feels like Democrats are
prophylaxis
often like
is what we call that.
Yes, the last battle. And so to me, it's not just that it was that you could conceive of, and I think that they probably, if you were to ask them behind closed doors, they'd probably be like, yeah, it was kind of a mistake, or yeah, I don't really feel about it, but this is like, I think that they were, if I were to really be good faith about it, and I think it's honest and true, that they were trying to look towards their reelection and in a moment in which there was a lot of uncertainty. So I'm not saying that they're bad people.
Those are tough decisions, I think.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm not down, and it's a tough decision overall in the scheme of the country, whatever. I do think though that this was predictable, and I do think that they made the wrong decision, and that's sort of like why I'm pissed about it. But it's not something where I'm like, I'm unwilling to ever vote for them ever again. In fact, we had like Mark Kelly on. You weren't able to do it. I think you were busy that day. But yeah, like, I would vote for Mark Kelly. I would vote. Yeah.
I don't roll on Saturdays.
I would vote for Ruben Gallego if he wins the primary or whatever. And so I don't think that I'm like this all or nothing person, but I will express frustration when it's like a major, like it's so obvious Trump is going to be using these immigration authorities to like fuck around and find out. And that's exactly what happened. Now, at the end of the day, right, like, would he have done it independent of the Lakin Riley Act? Almost certainly, right? Like the Lakin Riley Act, in other words, is not like Trump was going to do what he was going to do, and the Lakin Riley Act is kind of gravy, right? So that you could levy that argument. The reason I'm frustrated isn't just because the Democrats were a but-for cause for the Lakin Riley Act, or because I thought the Lakin Riley Act was like critical to the abuses that Trump was going to suffer, is that most of the time it's indicative of an inner fecklessness, a weakness. In other words, the thing itself, a lot of these votes don't end up going anywhere. Democrats just don't have the votes to impose the war powers resolution, even assuming that it's constitutional. Democrats just don't have the votes to block these sales to Israel. And even if they did, Trump's probably just going to ignore it. But the point is, I think it's an indicator to me of weakness in certain areas, or just like a kind of people who don't get it and aren't made for the moment. Not always, right? Sometimes you can overcome it. John Ossoff is one of the people who I most am excited about, in spite of his vote for the Lake and Riley Act. Same thing with like Gavin Newsom. Like, there's some things that Gavin Newsom has done that I like think are lame and weird and stupid, but I gave him massive credit for the redistricting. I thought that was brave. I thought he was a leader there. So I'm not an all or nothing thinker, but I think that there are a couple of key instances where I'm just like, this makes no fucking sense, guys. Like, think with your heads. But what do I know? But that's just an explanation of like why I get frustrated, is because there are some core areas where I think the Democratic Party just needs to see the future. One of those is Israel. One of those for sure is Israel. Another one is the war on Iran, where I think the Democratic Party they're now in a good spot, more or less a good spot on the Iran war. And I'm really happy about that. And I'm really happy that most of the Democrats are reading the room when it comes to Israel and Iran war. That's all really, really good. But another one of those is rights. And so contemporaneously, when I get mad, it's because I think it's like foreseeable or whatever.
I think on the topic of Israel, and I was just telling my chat about this at the start of the stream, but like for me, I think what is frustrating is like, if you're someone who wants policy outcomes, if you're someone that wants to change the composition of the Democratic Party to be one that is more adversarial with Netanyahu, to one that is like more or less open to sending arms shipments and financial aid and stuff like that, I think that's a worthy cause, and I'm on board with that cause. Like, I support heavily conditioned aid, or maybe discontinuing aid, reevaluating our relationship with Israel. I also understand that is a long established foreign partner, that it's like a codified relationship with Israel, and so that makes it kind of unique. And so, for example, like even if Biden wanted to pause weapon shipments, 5 months, 6 months into that situation, and he wouldn't have been able to do that. Like, he would have had to have gone through Congress. The Republicans controlled the House, and so there were a lot of people at the time that just took the view that Biden could have basically stopped that from happening unilaterally, and I don't think I agree with that. I don't think he could have just picked up a phone call.
It's unclear that he would have the political capital to effectuate it. To be honest with you, I do think that he should have been different. But
well, I mean, I do think he should have been like tougher, in public for sure. But I don't think he could have stopped that from happening in the way that it did. And I think that there was value in him keeping the Israelis close and not alienating them, because they were able to pressure them to allow aid into the country and evacuate Rafah before they did that big military offensive. And that alone, that Rafah thing, potentially saved tens of thousands of lives. I mean, there were...
Say nothing of the Iran war, which he, I think, prevented.
Right.
That a weaker president like Trump allowed for. So I don't think that Biden's policy overall, like, I think it's way too flattening to be like he was just awful on foreign policy, or indeed even Israel. I think that there's a marked difference between how Biden approached it, how Trump did, and in terms of the amount of leverage that Biden has over his own party, it's considerably less, or even over his own base. And so I do agree with you that there are some structural reasons why Biden can't do everything he wants to do. That notwithstanding that, we can admit that there were mistakes, so I agree with the limits there. I guess I'm not so much looking retrospectively. I'm looking like prospectively.
No, that's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. So moving forward, if you're someone who, like, Gaza and Gaza is your number one issue, and there's a lot of people like that. It's not necessarily a large share of the electorate, but certainly there's a lot of people online for which like this is like a primary issue for them. And I'm not even like knocking that. Like, most people focus on the economy and stuff like that, but there's nothing wrong with having anti-war activists in this country. There's, like that's we have a rich history of that. I think that's like one of the cooler things about our country. And like where I was raised, like the Bay Area is like the birthplace of the anti-war movement, so that's pretty cool. But it's just strategically, if that's what your goal is, I think you should want the candidates that you prefer out there aggressively campaigning on corruption, affordability, and anti-Iran war. Like, you should center those things in your campaign, because those are going to be the things that connect with voters. And when I was just watching the Majority Report today, and in that video where they were reacting to us, and Emma had, so the point of focusing on that is so that you can get to eventually like electing Democrats that are going to push your that are gonna push your kind of preferred policies when it comes to Israel. Like you can count on them in the Congress to be votes against funding or this kind of thing. But Emma had the order reversed. She was saying you have to center Israel Palestine first. That's the litmus test. That's what you need to like focus your run on, and then that way her theory is that by doing that, you're going to get more credibility from the voters because it's such a lopsided issue now where it's like 80-20, oppose Israel or something like that. And then once you get that buy-in, then you're going to have more credibility to push affordability stuff. And I just think she has that sequence reversed. I think you need to focus on this first, get elected so you can do this. And
so let me try to steel man, okay? Because I don't want to be heard to say that I think Israel is a top issue among the electorate. By which I mean, if you ask the electorate, what do you care most about? Israel's not going to show up in a top 5 list among general election voters. Okay.
Not even top 10.
So I agree with that. I don't want to be heard to think that like I'm overstating it. The reason why I think it's important, in similar ways that like support of Ukraine might be important in these ways, is number one, the effects of internal party divisions on an issue which I think is largely resolved by the party, not in the particulars, but in the kind of tenor. And here's what I mean by that. For example, the Trump administration on the Epstein files, this is not a high salience issue when it comes to the overall electorate. Agreed on that? Like no one in the election context in 2024, no one said in terms of the polling, right, that their top issue is Epstein. Very few, I would say. Maybe
it matters on the margins in ways that are impossible to quantify, right. And it's more kind of like throw that in the pile of thing that is causing the administration to lose credibility. But it's not like a high salience thing.
And it's causing them to lose credibility, not necessarily with like directly with the voter who is really steep in these issues, but I think an understated but important part of the machinery is like high information people who are your broadcasters, people who are your, very enthusiastic people who are going to be organizers, that you're, in other words, an issue that's high salience with high information people and where the majority of the party is, even though it's not highly ranked on a list of issues, that doesn't mean it couldn't cause internal party strife, which bleeds into actual problems when it comes to, the connection between the voter and the politician or the party. And that's what I'm getting at, and where I think.
But I think they're making those problems, though. I think they're deliberately making those problems.
Who's they? The lefties?
Yes, I think they're deliberately trying to make it more divisive than it already is because I'm not denying that. They think that it benefits them in the long run. They think that they can leverage that issue to purge the party of people that they think have a immoral.
I'm not denying their intention here is definitely to leverage that pain point, right? That's 100% a lot of their aims is to leverage the pain point so as to effectuate change, right? But I view it in a similar context as people who do something like that for Ukraine, right? In the Ukraine context, no one is going to list Ukraine as a top issue. But I would be seriously, I would look twice at a candidate in a primary context who said like, fuck Ukraine, fuck Europe, whatever. Maybe not necessarily for the fact that it is high salience with the voters directly, but it indicates a mismatch ideologically between the leaders and where the base is. So that's one problem, is that I don't feel like there's a responsiveness to an overwhelming issue. It portends bad things for policy. So something that is low salience among voters might lead to significant policy, which I think might cause problems down the line. And then, like I mentioned, this kind of mismatch between the high information people. If all of a sudden you knew that Kamala Harris was a hawk on Ukraine, by which I mean she's skeptical of Ukraine funding, you would feel a little less enthused going out to like stump for her, probably, right? You can understand that. If she was like, fuck Ukraine, like who cares, let them do whatever, you would feel weird about being the biggest Kamala stan on the debate stage and like having to be like, don't worry about Ukraine, don't worry about NATO. And that would, I think, disenchant you a little bit. And that's all I'm trying to say here, is that there's other forms in which this issue can rear its head that has negative knock-on effects to either your administration or to your popularity, right, that don't necessarily find themselves in the overall salience of the issue.
Right. I just think that they're intentionally trying to evoke that I agree.
Yes.
And so like, to me, just strategically, and I also think that they present it as a moral imperative as well. So that they think that,
of course they do, yeah,
because the conditions are so bad for people in Gaza that it's morally imperative to center that into discussion. If you don't, that means you're immoral. But I just look at I look at morals and strategy and how they interact politically. I look at that kind of thing very differently. So I think that the like you can make a moral argument for being like very strategic and pragmatic about how you call attention to political matters and how you discuss like how you do strategy. So like, I think that you have a moral imperative to like optimize your chances of winning and optimize like your wins around the country. And, you know, that might include like specifically not trying to blow up someone's candidacy in this race over Israel-Palestine if that candidate is like better positioned to win. And so, you know, I think I look at it in a more kind of like holistic sort of way.
No, I think that in terms of what I would like to see, I didn't want to see people constantly disclaiming that they're going to vote for Kamala Harris, even though I don't think it had I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think it had a huge impact on Kamala Harris's chance of winning the Gaza issue. I'm not even sure this whole like autopsy thing is going to show that was like a but-for cause of her loss or whatever.
Did you take a gander at their
a little bit?
Did you take a gander at their playbook or whatever? I just put that put that shit in Claude and had it spit out a summary. But you know,
oh shit, yeah, no. At some point, I'll take a look at your Claude summary or maybe even the lessons themselves. But what I'm trying to say is like, I don't disagree that.
By the way, though, they are 100% convinced that the DNC autopsy found that Gaza cost Kamala the election, and they're keeping it secret because they don't want to get out and piss off the donors. Like that's what they're all
that's one of those
saying
truisms, right?
Yes.
That's one of those truisms where like, I think that is partially bolstered by the fact that they won't release it, and that's what the PodSave guy said. This also in their most recent, or one of their most recent shows, where it's like
that's true.
Yeah,
they gave them ammunition. It caused a Streisand effect. It was just like really stupid to. I mean, there's some room for debate because like when you look at the Ken Martin quote,
sure,
actually, you know, the quote's kind of weird. He's like, okay, of course we're going to release it. We're going to release it to our members. And so, okay, were you talking about releasing it to everybody, or are you talking? You know,
it's not convincing. I'll tell you why. But I understand there's potential ambiguity. Someone can read into it. It's not convincing for the following reason. One is how it's understood publicly.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. For the record, I agree with you. I'm not.
So 100%. I'm not saying that you don't. I think the first thing I say is something you agree is like the public understanding of it was different, and at a certain point, public communication is going to necessarily, like, just doing the technically like I might do, right? Actually, the 51 intelligence agencies, former intelligence people who said that the Hunter Biden, that the laptop had the hallmarkings of Russian disinformation, doesn't mean that the people hear that. That's number one. But on the literal meaning too, the members of the DNC are like 400 or so members, right? And if it just is true, if you send out the report to 400 plus members, we're talking state chairs, we're talking certain incumbents of certain offices already, that is effectively making it public. Yep. So it just is. So even if you take it at the most literal, which means the DNC members, that is an effective public release, and we haven't seen that yet. And also,
they haven't sent it out to all the members yet. So yes. You know, yeah. So either which way,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's no way to slice it, and that's why Martin knows he's trying to move on from it. Like if Martin had a good technical, like actually whatever, he would say it, but he knows that it's inconsistent, no matter which way you slice it. Yeah, and that was maybe there's a good reason, right? Go for it. Sorry.
I do think there is a good reason. I mean, like I do think you can make a good argument for that kind of thing being limited to like leadership, because it is just the truth that like what I would expect to be in the autopsy is various errors at the state and like county level when it came to funding and like all dozens, hundreds of logistical problems that existed all over the country. Which is to say that I would expect in an autopsy like that for there to be a robust data set of all kinds of different variables. And I think it is the case that if you release something like that is that granular, that it does give bad faith actors some ammunition to cherry pick data points and then try to paint a larger narrative, which is divisive at a time when we're already doing like really good and the Republican Party are not doing really good. So, you know, like I do understand that argument. I think the blunder that he made was running on it and then not releasing it, because like, I think in chess, there's a term blunder, and it's just, it's there's like bad moves in chess, but there's like levels to it. And a blunder is just like just a straight up bad move. It's just obviously bad. It's just like the worst kind of bad moves. This was one of that, because I just don't think he quite understood just how much the DNC and perception of the DNC still continues to be really, really bad as like a relic from the 2016 stuff. And they already have like this right or wrong, you know, to what degree or whatever, they already have this reputation of being very, very much not transparent and very much like deceptive. And he played right into that with this, and he just like gave all of them ammunition against the DNC. So it was a blunder.
That's what kind of where I'm getting at. Yeah. So like, I'm amenable to the argument that there's such thing as like confidential information that shouldn't be released to the public. The DNC has internal deliberations and everything. And like, I don't have this kind of like ex-ante view that everything that should be done that's deliberated behind closed doors should be released. That's not, I'm someone who thinks that like there's problems, even though I agree with ultimate disclosure of the Epstein files. I think that there's been a lot of untalked about costs to this, even the way they're doing it now, which isn't even the full release of the Epstein files. And so I'm not someone who says maximum disclosure at all times is like a per se good. And I would even be open to saying, well, okay, let's keep it more limited ex ante. The thing is, we don't live in an ex ante world. We live in a world in which the context is he did in fact make those kinds of statements, which were interpreted by people a certain way.
What is that?
Ex ante means like before the model applies, right? Before, from a perspective before the thing happens, right? Ex ante, that is to say, like before the thing. We could say in a perfect world we would have set it up such that he didn't make the promise, right?
Okay.
And so ex ante, you could say, you shouldn't release it. Don't give the promise. But the thing is, he already did the thing. He already made the promise, and we live in that world, not the other world. And given that we live in that world, everything that you said just comes online. The thing about the reputation of feeling fearful, reputation of being cagey, right? It's a big reason why not lefties, not just lefties, I should say, rank and file Democrats, regular, like blood and soil, like blue Democrats don't disapprove of their party with like historic disapproval by our own party members of the party leadership and where we're at. And it's not just because of these crazy lefties. In other words, that reputation of fecklessness, of weakness, of being scared, of being cagey, of not being upfront, all of these things magnify. And so, it's a huge mistake. And at this point, why is this better? Like, why is this news cycle the optimal news cycle? We're seeing the kind of hay that is being made about the lack of the release of the autopsy report. And you have to, just like in the same way of like, well, why would Trump hide the Epstein files? There's got to be something really damaging in there if he's wasting all this political capital and reputational harm to do it. It's the same kind of thing that it leads to negative inferences on the Ken Martin side. In addition, last thing, and I'll let you respond. I also saw the Pod Save one where they recently say like they are talking to people who say that perhaps one of the reasons they didn't release it is because it's like a shitty report written by his like friend, and they don't want to have to get into like the fact that the report is like functionally like just a bad report, putting aside it's any kind of like
I didn't hear about that. Of it. Like they're saying that they know someone who says that it was just like haphazardly done, or just like not a good.
So Favreau and Levitt and who's the not Dan Pfeiffer, the other one. I'm not remembering his name. Tommy Vitor.
Tommy Vitor, yeah.
Tommy, those three, I think, at least two, at least Tommy and at least Favreau, perhaps Levitt, they said we talked to people in the know, and they would have access to a lot of these people who say that the reason that Martin is not disclosing it doesn't have to do with Israel, Palestine, doesn't have to do with anything in particular, other than the report was really, really badly done. And essentially it was like a fucked up process, and it was just like a bad report, embarrassing report that isn't like worth publishing. If that's the case, I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like if that's the reason, that's like just a bad, like just do the report right then, right? Just do it correctly. But yeah, that's and it's just going to have a life of its own. So yeah, I think that is a big mistake.
Well, let's talk about Taylor Lorenz. Let's talk about that pod. When you were interjecting, was your goal to here was my sense of things. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a couple things going on there, maybe a few. I think the first thing that popped into my mind was that I suspected that you might have been wary of the optics of a pylon. And so you saw me and Soy Pill kind of bouncing off each other, and then you didn't want the optics to be like she
not the main reason, but it's something I thought about. Yeah,
I felt like maybe that was partly motivating you, but also there was also it did take. I think. Well, you tell me. I mean, were you trying to? Yeah. Did you meaningfully disagree with the points that I was making, or did you think that the arguments could have been sharper?
Some of them.
Or did you think that like the arguments could have been sharper, and that's what motivated you to jump in when you did?
I guess that's an important distinction to make in terms of disagreement. It depends on which. I disagree, perhaps, and maybe you didn't mean it, but as I was hearing it, what you said about the disclosure. So I disagree with that. So anytime I disagreed, I felt that I wanted to raise it. So that was a sufficient condition for me to.
Which part about the disclosure? Which part?
That the article doesn't, in fact, that it's untrue. The statement that it was untrue that the contract prohibited disclosure of the relationship. That statement, that whole exchange. And regardless of whether it's true or not, my perception was that there was a factual error there. So if I perceived a material factual error, I almost certainly was going to like step in at some point, at least as I heard it. So that was enough. I don't know on the centrist point whether I quote unquote disagree with you. On that point, I felt that we were spinning our wheels in something that was not helpful for the discussion and therefore needed to be clarified. And that is just a very specific point, not on the claim that you made. And I think you and Soypel made it quite well, that centrist is used as a pejorative. I agree with that. And I agree that like when you pulled up all of those instances where she uses centrist, that's at least that's good evidence, right? That this is being used as a pejorative. What I disagreed with was substantially disagreeing on the fact of the matter regarding Olivia Juliana being a centrist itself. The reason I disagree with that is because obviously the term centrist is capable of multiple reasonable interpretations of what it means. It's not like one single objective definition of the word centrist. And so I would sooner have, and I thought it would have been better if we just get clarity and insight on Taylor's term centrist. What do you mean? What did you mean, Taylor, when you wrote centrist, right? And do you agree that that is a proper label? And so why? Why is it a proper label? And that actually is effective, I think, for you if you're able to say, well, all I mean by centrist, if Taylor says all I mean by centrist is aligned with the Democratic Party, that's additional evidence that her calling it out is not a good explanation. It's not a good explanation in the article to be like, well, I just wanted to make sure that the reader knew that Olivia Juliana was aligned with the Democratic Party. That's all kind of presupposed in the fact that they're a part of course in the first place. And so it lends more plausibility to the argument that it's being used as an indicator, right? As a framing device. And so rather than trying to like, to bog you down, I was trying to do the opposite. I was trying to be like, why are we talking about whether it's true or not, whether she's a centrist? Let's just get clarity on what Taylor meant and then go to the thing that matters, which is the framing.
Let's zoom out a little bit. I want to go back to the Olivia thing, but I want to ask you, cause I went in there, I kind of went back and forth about like what I wanted, what my goals were with the conversation with her. And I had like 4 different outlines of like lines of questioning. And it changed like right up until like the last minute. But what do you think I was trying to uncover and expose in that conversation, just like at a macro level?
That the article takes a ideological stand against a certain group of people and portrays them as villains in this battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, and that the people who are the good guys in this story are the non-centrist, non-Hassan types. I thought that you're trying to make the claim this isn't just a factual article, it's a polemic. That's, I think, the point that you were trying to raise.
Yeah. So that's why I asked her the first question, what is the crux of your article? Because when I was doing the research for the debate, I watched a ton of her podcast appearances, and unsurprisingly, including the conversation she had with you, and unsurprisingly, she framed the article very differently depending on who she was talking to. So when she was in explicitly leftist spaces, it was about this. What did you say? What is the word polemic? What does that mean?
It's like an argumentative article that is trying to, it's usually like castigating or taking a stand, fiery against a particular view.
Right.
So it's like opinionated.
A speech or a piece of writing expressing a strongly critical attack on a controversial opinion about someone or something. Okay, yeah.
Polemic,
yes, so that's good. I'm going to start using that word. So, yes, I do think that she was pushing a polemic in that article. Did I use that right? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And by the way, I agree with that.
Okay. So, and I thought what was especially revealing was for example, when she was talking with you, it was about disclosure. You guys, you focused on the disclosure part. You didn't really get much into the stuff that I was talking about. And in other spaces that she went to, center left spaces, she kept on emphasizing, nowhere in my article did I say anything about Israel. That we're not. I can't tell that nothing in our reporting revealed that this was about ideology. It was just. But then when she would go into, and especially on her YouTube video that she put out the day of the article, it was all about that polemic. It was all about like they didn't even approach Hassan Piker because he's so virtuous that why would they? Because this is like a corrupt thing. Which I'm also interested, before we even get like just a side detour, I think what she's doing is like very tricky for her because I think she's trying to be like a hybrid influencer / journalist. But if you write a piece of reporting, I don't know. I feel like it's important that you.
I think she is both. I think she wears different hats at different times. And I agree that sometimes, and that's ironically one of the questions I asked was like, how do you separate these two different roles and what do you see as them? And she references this distinction when she's like, one of the problems here is that they're labeling themselves a journalist. And so I agree, this two different role thing sometimes will cause issues. Unfortunately, like it just is the case that even a lot of like articles that claim to be objective, whatever, even just choosing what to edit, choosing what to highlight, all these editorial decisions are in some sense normative. Like the New York Times, when it construes a given phenomena a given way with a certain terminology, there is some normative aspects to it. I think what most people are trying to get at, though, is that like the journalistic process, when you wear a journalistic hat, it implies some level of standard of procedure governing you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and I do agree that there's oftentimes it's unclear which hat is being worn in which conversation, and it can lead to big problems for Taylor, as to point out.
I question the ethics of it because, you know, it is normal for journalists when they write some big piece to go on like a media tour to talk about their reporting. But what you don't normally see are journalists that are expanding on their reporting in ways. So like, for example, she had this larger commentary, obviously with her tweet, which I thought was really damning, when she said the day that it was posted, of the 90 influencers we saw, they were mostly centrist, pro DNC / pro Israel.
Yeah, that was the most brutal part of the whole thing. I think was the lack of any methodology there. And you were able to highlight that.
But you didn't. But she didn't add that in her article because like she couldn't substantiate that, right? So like, to me, it feels like there's a big ethical question here about like, you didn't have the goods to like nail them down in the article that this thing was going on. But then you go over to your social media feed and you like kind of supplement your reporting with things that were not established. And to me, that's like,
they aren't just opinions. They're statements of fact, right? There's some sort of factual allegation there that would seem to be like, well, some kind of addendum or some kind of additional inference that maybe isn't in the article, but might carry the imprimatur of Wired in a way that people should read into. Right. Now, she disclaims that, right? She says the article stands for itself. In a way it does. I kind of buy that, not every tweet should be read into every article and they don't incorporate themselves by reference, but it's something that you should call them on in terms of, well, what can you actually show? At a bare minimum, I think it helps.
I don't know.
Angle of framing.
I don't think you can separate the two. Like, I don't. So she puts her article out, but then she adds all this extra commentary on her social media feed. To me, that it's like, well, okay, well, if you're adding this as an addendum in your own commentary, then I'm going to treat it like an addendum. I'm going to treat it like it's in the writing, because
I think you should treat it as a factual statement for sure. And it bears on her credibility. It bears on how we should interpret her article for sure, if these are her views. And certainly when it comes to the framing argument, I think it's highly relevant there. All I'm just saying is I don't think necessarily a tweet that is giving some opinion that relates topically to a factual article is being incorporated by reference. That is just a way of me saying that like there's additional inferential steps that I think are required to draw that connection, which I think you guys were able to do on the framing issue specifically. And again, calling out on the methodology to even make that assertion as a tweet, right? It bears on the article insofar as it bears on her credibility and her bias. and it stands on its own as an unjustified statement regarding the topic of the article.
So what did you mean when you were pressing me on? You jumped in at various points, and one the thing that stuck out to me was when you pressed me on. Would Biden call himself a centrist? What was the point of that interjection?
Yes. So the point of that interjection was to bring to your mind and to all of our minds that there is no like one true objective meaning of the term centrist. And so Biden's centrist, calling himself a centrist, is another man's most progressive president of all time. And what's me bringing that up, like, wouldn't you, like Biden called himself a centrist? Would you say he's not a centrist? If someone said centrist, would you disclaim that out? It all depends on like what is being meant by the statement. And so me bringing up Biden calls himself a centrist, wouldn't you consider Biden a centrist? Is to indicate that like whether the statement is true or not depends on in what sense you mean centrist. And I'll give you at least 3 plausible interpretations of centrist that are not just like fanciful. They're out there, right? There's a centrist in the sense that you mean, which I agree is a plausible centrist. That's the Joe Manchin types, right? There's centrist in some approximate sense of the country, centrist. There's centrist in the sense of internal, not just country, internal democratic divisions. So the centrist Schumer versus the non-centrist AOC Bernie wing of the party. That's looking at internal party divisions. And it wouldn't be accurate to say that Schumer is a centrist the way Manchin is a centrist, right? Because Schumer is, of course, not a centrist in the way that Manchin is a centrist. And then there's the centrist in the sense of political ideology, in which case it would be accurate to say that Schumer, Manchin, you, and me are all centrist in the overall scheme of political ideologies where we have like far left Marxists and far right and anarcho-capitalists. So those are 3 plausible senses in which centrist can be used differently.
I think in a vacuum and assuming good faith, that is an important thing to unpack. Like, and I think that's like a really fascinating question to me in the modern era, as far as like, what do these terms mean? Like, what does leftist mean? What does liberal mean? What is, it's become so squishy these days that I almost think that these terms do more harm than good. And so I don't know. It's just, so anyways, but that's like a whole separate conversation.
All I'm trying to say is like, I think what I was trying to press for is just to ask her in what sense she's using centrist, because there's no objectively correct definition of centrist.
But here's the thing, though.
Is going to lead to you're using it. Yeah.
But so the question itself, like your interjection, it presupposes good faith on the part of Taylor Lorenz. Well, I think it does, because the point of my line of questioning, and Soypil picked up on it, was I don't think that she was using that word in good faith. I think I
agree with you on that.
Positive that she was using it as a pejorative. And the whole point of like pressing her on like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? And then it just laid bare that, number one, she wasn't even prepared to answer like what a centrist is. I mean, that's pretty notable. And then also, like the fact that it applied to Juliana is just like, I think is pretty silly when you look at her.
Well, no, there are some senses in which she would be a centrist.
Well, sure, but I understand that. Sure, I take your point. But at that point in the conversation, I think in my opinion, I had already kind of exposed that she was using the term in a bad faith way. And so when you did that and interjected the way that you did, I felt like it gave her a lifeline, because now it's like, now I'm fighting you on the subjective nature of it. And we're moving away from the fact that she clearly used that label in a malicious way. I mean, it's a subtle thing. You have to be kind of online and you have to kind of work.
That's the conclusion, right?
Versed in online politics. But I think it was pretty obvious at that point that she got her caught with her hand in the cookie jar. And so when you did that, I was like,
dispute. No. So my interjection does not presuppose good faith, and I'll tell you why. I actually think it furthers your argument, if I'm being honest with you. But the first thing to note here is that the term and moniker centrist, whether or not she's using that as a pejorative, that's the conclusion we're trying to demonstrate, right? And we're trying to demonstrate it, presumably, not just the people who already agree with us, but the people who are objective and neutral, people who are first-time watchers of this conversation who don't know anything about it. And so it's the conclusion we're trying to demonstrate, right, is that she's using this term in a bad faith way. And so we can't presuppose bad faith because that's just begging the question. It's circular, right?
No, that's why I went through like a line of questioning. Like I kind of guided her there. And I what I'm saying, Pisco, is I think we were already there. Like it was already established to me. Like I didn't need to sharpen the argument more. It was just obvious to anyone watching that it was a joke what she was saying. A centrist is pro-Democrat? What? Excuse me? Like, and then she also like kind of hung herself a little bit with her words because she was claiming like, oh, that's what I called her in the past. And then we find a quote from her, 2 years before the article calling Juliana a progressive. And so it's just, yeah.
Again, that's presupposing that progressive and centrist are counterposed, that they're in contradiction with each other. But that's, again, presupposing a meaning of the term centrist. And what I'm trying to, I'm not at all pinging you for going down this line. I'm not. I really am not. There's a very specific sense in which I'm critical and exhausted by that line of question. It's disputing the actual, in fact, trueness of whether Olivia Giuliani is, in fact, a centrist. But the reason why what I'm saying here doesn't presuppose good faith on Taylor Lorenz's part is you can just ask her and we can just say, well, in what sense do you mean centrist? And a question doesn't presuppose good faith. So that question doesn't presuppose good faith. And when you ask her and she says something like, well, I just mean Democrat aligned.
But we had at that point.
Furthers your point. Okay,
we already had asked her.
Okay, but I heard, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, that there was we were actually disputing whether she was like lying about whether Olivia Giuliani was a centrist and like disputing the factual accuracy of that claim. And that's what I'm saying I think is a waste of the time. What we should do, I think, is use that definition that she's provided, Democrat aligned, which, by the way, to me is not an implausible definition that someone could mean when it comes to centrists. People use it that way.
Hang on.
To refer.
But who uses it that way? I mean, Hassan Piker technically is Democratic Party aligned, right?
Well, I think that shows the problem in her usage there and makes it implausible, right? That point is a great point that demonstrates why what I'm offering here furthers the argument of bad faith. Why? Because what you just observed, that if what you mean by centrist is aligned with the Democratic Party, then that would mean that you're not actually contrasting Hassan versus Olivia Giuliana. And so it's implausible that this is being used as one of those indicators, in which case it furthers the
but
evidence
Pisco,
that she's using it as an...
Right, but Pisco, yeah. I'm saying from my view, internally, I felt like we had already like established that. Like we were past that point. Like I feel like I had established that she had an incoherent, inconsistent definition of centrist that made no sense. And I also think that
then Olivia Giuliana is a centrist on that view. If you think it's incoherent, then there's no use disputing whether she is, because she is on that view.
Explain, what is that?
You haven't done it.
Wait, what?
So if you have shown that she's just using it as an indicator of to be bad faith, then what's the point? If you've already shown that, in other words, you've proven that conclusion, that's what you just said right then. What's the point in disputing the accuracy of whether she is or not? At that point, you've already made the case.
That's a part of it to me. And I guess maybe we're getting hung up here because I don't quite agree with you. I don't think that like when we think of the term centrist colloquially, especially if she's the one that's saying that this article is written from a politically neutral point of view. Like I have opinions, but they weren't present in my article. She was presenting this as like neutral journalism. And so when I think of neutral journalism in language, I'm thinking of colloquial use. So it's true that like if you go into leftist spaces, they feel very comfortable calling Olivia Giuliana a centrist, and that's just a truism to them, right? But colloquially, if her article was not specifically catered to appeal to that group, that group of like people, then there is no good faith reading that Olivia Giuliana
right.
is a centrist.
You're assuming that there's like a correct definition here about what a centrist is. That's precisely what I'm saying.
Colloquially, yes, I am.
I don't agree with that. Like, and I think that's what the Biden example shows. It's like if someone said Biden's a centrist, right? Would you be like, you're wrong?
Well, there's nuance because, like, I would say that he
that's what I'm saying. This context is required.
Well, there's more nuance for him because he's a politician, though. So, like, I would say that he ran more centrist-y in 2020. But even then, like, his 2020 platform was pretty decently progressive when it came to policy. And then he governed.
So what do you mean by centrist?
He governed even more progressive than he ran on. But he was kind of giving off the aesthetic, he was
what do you mean by centrist? Like, and is it indexed differently to politicians versus commentators?
I think so. Yeah, okay, I think so. Yeah.
So give me a sense of centrist, which actually, so your sense of centrist that you're going to give me, which is the colloquial one, give me that sense of centrist, and then also make sure that whatever sense you're giving to me does index as between these two different groups. That is to say, commentators and politicians.
I mean, I would say centrism, like centrist would be like more or less synonymous with moderate. It could mean someone that has a decently balanced policy preference set. So maybe they're super pro-gun and they're super hawkish on foreign policy, but they believe in single payer and like I think of like Jared Polis is like a really good example of someone like this, or someone who is like positioned like instead of like a $15 an hour minimum wage, right? They're for a $12 minimum. Yeah, I do think that the term centrist and moderate are very closely related.
Right, but like those are referential terms, right? Like, so moderate presupposes like some orthodoxy, presupposes some political context that we exist in. And I really like in the context of any kind of discussion, it could mean completely different things. So I mean, I don't quibble that much with,
I just don't think colloquially
using it synonymously with moderate.
I don't think colloquially people understand the word centrist to be someone like Olivia Giuliani, who is like a explicit partisan Democrat who is like pushing her main priorities are like standard Gen Z progressive issues like LGBTQ plus and abortion rights and climate and stuff. Like that is not what any reasonable person would identify as a centrist from a neutral label.
In any context?
Not certainly, but remember Pisco, like Taylor Lorenz's assertion was that her article was written without like personal bias or opinion interjected. She was saying that it was not motivated by ideology. That was her framing. And so like under that framing, if it's neutral reporting, if we're not saying, well, it's all, there's degrees, and if you go into a leftist, to them, Juliana's a leftist. Well, okay, but she's explicitly saying she did not write the article from the perspective of a leftist, right?
If I were to read a neutral and not biased article, assumedly, right, which labeled Biden a centrist, I wouldn't look twice at it. Or Obama as a centrist. I would understand probably what's being talked about there is with respect to internal divisions within the Democratic Party. So when they refer to Obama a centrist Democrat, they're almost certainly referring to him in the context of the Democratic Party overall and contrasting him to people like Bernie Sanders or something. I would not look twice at that from an assumedly objective news reporter. Do you understand that? So like, I don't look twice at as people in the news media referring to Obama or Biden as centrist, because in that context, I understand probably what they're getting at is to contrast
in an op-ed maybe, but I think I would actually, like if it was like a WAPO or like a Reuters article written about Obama or in the context of like campaigning or whatever, and they called him a centrist, I think I would think twice about that. I think I would be like, that's interesting phrasing. But if it's like an op-ed from some left-wing writer for WAPO, then that's a different situation, right?
I don't know that so I agree they're different situations, but we're referring to some kind of like colloquial sense of the term centrist. And I think that whatever colloquial sense that we're applying here could plausibly apply to Obama, right? And it could plausibly apply to Biden. And now you're saying treat them differently because they're politicians. I don't know why, because the sense that you gave me for centrist it wasn't indexed to where you're coming from. But I guess I'll just ask you directly. Do you think that Obama is a centrist in a colloquial sense?
No, I don't. I think if you ask the country, just 100 people, if they consider Obama centrist, I think the amount of people that would say yes to that would be like 20 or 25%, maybe. Like maybe 20%. I don't know. Like it's just
what if you ask them about Biden? Is that if that's what we're going by in terms of what we expect people would say? I think people would.
Well, that's what we mean by colloquial.
About Biden.
That's what we mean by colloquial, right?
When I say colloquial, I feel like it's indexed to maybe some normality, perhaps, but on the concept, right? The colloquial definition, not necessarily the application. The colloquial definition is more than just like saying, well, I think colloquially they wouldn't understand it as applied to Olivia Giuliana. Colloquial in the sense of what the word.
Uh-oh. You froze. You're better now. You're better.
Uh-oh. I have some drop frames. Testing 1, 2, 3. We're good?
I can hear you fine.
Yeah, the colloquial is indexed to like the understanding of the concept in the word, right? It's a semantic colloquialness. That is to say, I could show that the colloquial definition of a given word is whatever's in the Oxford Dictionary or whatever, and that is the colloquial definition. And it would still be the colloquial definition, even if, as applied, that word would be considered not appropriate by like a majority of people to a given context, right? It would be like saying, for example, do you ever have these conversations about communism where people will say, well, Stalinism isn't real communism, right? the USSR wasn't actually communist, right? So there's a difference between using colloquial to refer to like the definition versus its application. And so that's all I'm trying to get at here. And I do think that there's a plausible sense in which you could call Obama a centrist. He was a moderate in many things. You know, he was in favor of moderating when it comes to, that was the sense in which you meant. If there was one defining characteristic of the sense of centrist that you said, it was moderate. He was moderate on healthcare. He wasn't all or nothing socialized medicine or whatever. He was a moderate when it came to foreign intervention. He was a moderate as he governed. He wanted to rule from the middle in many ways.
Well, I think he was a pragmatist. Like, I don't think he was ideologically like a centrist. I mean, I guess that's a different question. Are you like ideological centrism versus like
he's a moderate
centrism in
practice? He ran as a moderate. He's a change agent, no doubt, but he was a moderate. I mean, he was moderate on social issues too. He wasn't in favor initially of gay marriage.
But that's when then like the moderate label for Barack Obama is a conversation within the Democratic Party. And again, like Taylor's reporting was from a neutral, what she said, there were her politics, according to her, didn't play any impact into her writing. And so if you're writing,
that's the conclusion we're trying to show, right? So I understand that, right? Like the conclusion we're trying to show is that she is being biased, right? So we can't assume that.
But I had already
trying to demonstrate that,
but
right?
I didn't assume that. I'm telling you, and this is like the third time I've told you in this conversation, I had already demonstrated that firmly, in my opinion. Like I think like with my line of questioning and the answers that she was giving, it was just obvious at that point that she didn't even really think about like what the label meant for Julie. That's what I think our conversation exposed. Is like she was not prepared to answer the question at all about like, why does that label apply? She just flailed around. And like she blamed her editors, stretched the definition of centrist to be something fucking absurd to apply to Bernie Sanders and AOC.
Here's the problem, right? Like stretching presupposes like the correct definition, right? You're only stretching the definition if there is some sense.
But we don't even need to. But I don't even think we need to go down this road because, like, do you disagree that by that point, it was apparent that Taylor hadn't even really thought about what that term meant for Juliana? Like at that point in the conversation, was it not apparent that she had used that term for another reason?
Not until Soypil brought up the invocations of centrist on her Twitter feed, where she's using it as a pejorative. Unless you're going into the conversation assuming that she is bad faith about that term, but assuming that you're not going into the conversation, right? I'm assuming that you're not assuming that she's bad faith. Fair?
When I had the conversation, was I not assuming that she was bad faith?
Right. You didn't go into the conversation, or sorry, you probably did, but assuming that you weren't assuming bad faith, right? Assuming that you had to demonstrate bad faith.
No. Well,
you can't just say you use centrist and say, and you didn't think about it as much, and therefore you're bad faith.
But I didn't do that. But I didn't do that. I take your point. You can't be so direct with an accusation. Like if you think somebody has hidden motives, you want to bring it out in a different way, which is what I did. Like I was very conscious about the questions that I was asking her because I was kind of taking her along a journey and then like letting her kind of hang herself with her own rope, which is what she did by that point.
I think the course of the conversation, we did demonstrate that centrist, and by we, I just mean like you and Soypil. I think in the course of the conversation, I don't know exactly when, I would be convinced, you demonstrated that she was using it as a pejorative. I don't doubt that. And in fact, I happen to agree that you did, right? But the question is, did you demonstrate that at the time I interjected?
In my opinion, I did, because like as soon as she gives 3 or 4 nonsensical, sometimes contradictory answers, at that point it's like, well, wait a second, something fishy's going on here.
You saying it's nonsensical, right, presupposes some standard, right? You say it's nonsensical because the real definition, and that's why we can't get around the semantic.
But I don't even. But Pisco, right? I don't even have to go down your line of thinking here, where there's some standard or subjective standard and exploring what that means. I don't even need to do that if I can reveal that she clearly didn't herself. She clearly didn't give any thought as to what it meant for her to call her a centrist, unless
I thought you said
she was using that label,
right?
Unless she was using that label in a pejorative way. That's my point. Like,
well, hang on. So you asked her. We should actually review what you said. But like, when you asked her, when you were using the term centrist, there, you don't think that she's actually a centrist, and she said, no, I do think that she is a centrist. And
I don't think that's what I said. I think I led by asking her, like, well, what does that word mean to you, and why does it apply to her? And then as soon as I did that, that's when her answers like spiraled, and she started to lose composure like within 10 minutes of our conversation and get defensive. And I think at that point, like it was obvious that it was motivated by an agenda. So I don't even need to do this whole like, well, it could have meant subjective, centrist could have meant that way to Taylor. And again, I want to again, like it shouldn't matter like what it meant to her as like positioned as a leftist or appealing to a leftist audience. If you're writing the article from a neutral perspective, you should use the word the way that like most people think of that word, not from the perspective of like an online leftist.
Right. So we have to demonstrate she's in fact doing that, right? And not adhering.
In my opinion, I did.
Okay.
I think Pisco, I think you stretched that conversation out. Like you stretched it out to like 25 minutes. It could have been a 10-minute conversation, but you interjected. And
why don't we go to the actual moment in the conversation? Hang on. So
you want to review it?
We can. Yeah, let's. Can you share it from your end? So you assigned the label a centrist to Olivia Giuliano, which is how she self-identified. No, she self-identified as a progressive, right? No, from what I found in my original reporting back from the New York Times back when I interviewed her, she was identified as a centrist Democrat in Texas. So that is you would agree that's a coherent. So just to be clear, you agree that it's a coherent thing to say. I'm going by self-ID.
It's not an incoherent thing to say, fair? It is no. I don't think that's a defensible argument because in recent years, like
it's understandable, right? It's understandable.
No, it's not. I'm saying it's not understandable.
Well, I mean, it's coherent. You can understand the concept of it. I don't mean that it's.
I can understand the concept of it, but what's the problem with that, Pisco, is that Olivia Giuliani has been self-identifying as a progressive since 2021, and Taylor Lorenz in 2023 was calling Giuliana a progressive. So in this moment, she's just lying. She's like, Taylor is just lying about that.
So you need to establish that there's in order for that to be convincing evidence, I'm just telling you from a neutral perspective, in order for that to be convincing evidence of inconsistency in her lying, you would need to show that the notion of centrism is opposed to progressivism, that they're they're contradictory.
Why do I need to show that?
You agree with that, right?
No, I don't. Anybody watching a political podcast, I don't need to explain that there's a difference between centrism and progressive. Why would I need to explain that? I mean,
if you actually want to show that she's lying, it would have to be the case that it's that being a progressive means that you're not a centrist. That's just analytically required, correct? It is.
No.
How can she be lying if it's not?
Pisco,
if both things can be true at the same time.
If anybody watching a political podcast, do you really think anyone in that audience needs
I'm just focusing on the argument.
Explained? No, but you're I don't know what you're doing. You're framing the argument from a way that makes no sense. Everybody listening to that podcast, a political podcast, understands that there's a material difference between centrist and a progressive. I don't need to establish that.
No, hang on.
The conversation.
I am not. Do you hear me to say that I don't think that progressive and centrism as terms mean different things?
No. But you're saying I need to establish that with the audience, but they know, bro. They're watching a political podcast.
On Taylor's view, there are progressive centrists, and that's not an incoherent concept.
What? No. When did she say this?
She said in the exchange that she views progressive sometimes as like a signifier that centrists use to group themselves in.
Well, at that point she was flailing, Pisco. At that point she had debate broed herself into taking the position, well, Bernie's centrist on some things. I mean, she was completely flailing at that point.
I'm just trying to go into the real nuts, like the nuts and bolts of the argument. All right.
But you're lending legitimacy. You're lending legitimacy to her arguments, and I don't understand why. You're like, well,
in what sense am I lending legitimacy to it?
Because you're saying, well, in Taylor's mind, centrists can be progressive. No, that's not true. She was just lying in that moment. She was just debate broing herself into a stupid position.
Taylor's stated view, I'm not having to say that she actually adheres to it, okay? Her stated view is that someone can be a progressive and a centrist at the same time.
Well, why do I care about her stated view if I clearly think that it's dishonest?
Are you trying to debunk it? Okay, we're trying to establish that, right? I'm trying to establish whether or not you debunked it at a given point or not, right? We can't just assume you already did. I thought we were trying to walk through it, whether or not you established that she was lying or being bad faith at a given moment.
No. You should assume that though, because you are plugged into politics. Everybody in the audience is plugged into politics. Everybody heard her say that. And I'm sure most people in the audience that were listening across all those channels thought, that's a weird thing to say. Like, I don't need to flesh this out. It's just on its face absurd.
something being on its face absurd sounds like it's saying like it's self-evidently
that's what I'm saying. Yes, I think it was self-evidently true that she was lying in that spot.
Something that's self-evident isn't justified. You understand that? Justification, it provides a basis by which to come to a conclusion via an inference, but self-evident is an assumption.
Yes, I'm assuming that the vast majority of everybody that was listening to the podcast understood that she was contradicting herself, and she backed herself into a corner. That's what I think most people.
In order for to,
I didn't need to flesh it out. It was just laid bare right there for everybody to see.
I'm just trying to establish like the kind of inferential steps that someone would need to draw to say, oh, she's lying, caught, right? Regardless of whether you stated them, right? Someone would need to immediately upon hearing that you called her a progressive before, in order to say, therefore you're lying, you would need to come to the conclusion that being a progressive is incompatible with being a centrist. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense as an own, right? It doesn't make sense as an own unless you can show that centrism and progressivism are like oil and water.
Let's pause for a second.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Not really. Let's pause for a second. I understand what you're meaning in the abstract.
I don't think you do, man.
I do. I think I understand what you're meaning in the abstract. I don't think you're applying it in a way that makes sense, because if you had to guess, just ballpark, everybody in the audience that was listening to that podcast, what percentage of them, when they heard Taylor say that, you know, the label centrist could apply to Bernie and AOC, what percentage of the audience collectively heard that and thought that was a contradiction that didn't make sense?
Probably a lot of them, the majority, but the majority of the audience already agrees with you.
Then what are we talking about?
I
think it was probably 90.
A centrist. I think she said Bernie was a centrist on some things.
Right. She was obviously stretching the definition in a way that.
Well, no, but you agree Bernie is a centrist on some things, right?
No, it's not what it means to be a centrist on some things. Like if someone, so Bernie, for example, is he's into like protectionism, and he's not big on like anti-gun laws as far as I understand.
So you agree that he's a centrist on something?
No, but that's not him being a centrist on those things. That doesn't make any sense. That's just him having a couple views that are like out of the Democratic Party orthodoxy. But by and large, like holistically, everybody understands Bernie Sanders to be like functionally a progressive. Like I don't think actions can be like centrist in the way that you're kind of describing them right here.
You don't think that centrist can be a more like localized description? Like he's a centrist on this issue. She's a centrist on healthcare. He's a centrist on Israel.
Is that what you think Taylor meant, or do you think that she was kind of she had backed herself into a corner?
Okay, but Hutch, you know that I agree with you on the overall conclusion. What's the use in zooming out and say I agree with the conclusion?
But you also
trying to get into
that,
the merits of the argument.
No, but Pisco, you also agree that you said a majority. I think it's a vast majority of our audience understood that to be a contradiction at the time. So why am I going to sit here and waste time? Like, well, okay, I need to be really sure that I flesh this out, and the audience knows that, you know, like centrist and progressive are different. That doesn't make any sense for this setting.
All I'm trying to say is the fact that you're saying, well, most of the audience understands it as a contradiction, presupposes that in order for it to be good evidence of bad faith, it would need to be a contradiction, right? You agree with that?
Yes.
It would need to be, okay, cool.
Yes.
So whether or not it is a contradiction and whether or not it's bad faith turns on subjectivity, whether or not subjectively she believes them to be in contradiction, and whether it's plausible that they wouldn't be in contradiction.
So you're saying
right?
it would have been
turns on them.
So you're saying it would have been a good use of my time to spend extra time having to convince the 5 to 10% of the audience that maybe weren't aware that centrism and progressivism like this is like a contradiction. It would have been a good use of my time to focus on those people and flesh that out. Why would I do that? I'm just like, just move on at that point, because like the audience knows what's happening.
Okay, I'm not making the claim that it would be a good use of your time to flesh out the thing that we're doing right now about the epistemics of, the meaning of these terms in the relation that we're describing right now. What I'm saying I think is a better use of our time is to ask her directly, what do you mean by centrist, and why does it apply to Olivia Giuliana?
But I did do that.
Yeah, I know you did. Accept what she says as the meaning, and instead of fighting on whether it is factually true or not that Olivia Giuliana in some objective sense or some colloquial sense is instead of like fighting on that, to just use whatever meaning she is to eviscerate her, right? which is to say, if what you mean by centrist is X, Y, or Z, then why would you call out Olivia Giuliana being a centrist? That makes no sense, right? In other words, it doesn't presuppose good faith.
I understand what you're saying, and I think your logic would apply if this was maybe a televised debate on like C-SPAN. That makes sense. Or like a televised debate on like, or in a podcast that is not very political, you know, like a comedian podcast or something like that. Then I think it makes sense. But our audience are, you know, from center left to progressive spectrum, mostly progressive, I would say, and very highly engaged in politics. So I don't need to accept her framing. I can harp on that just at face value and say that's a contradiction.
I'm going to do a bombshell right now. I mean, I'll give you a bombshell. I think there is a coherent notion of a progressive centrist. I don't think it's incoherent, and I don't think it's a contradiction, unless you have clarity on what you mean by those terms. I think that, for example, I'll give you an example. I think Biden, in a sense, is a centrist progressive.
I don't know. I just don't know what that means. Like, what does that mean?
I can tell you what you mean. Progressive is usually a reference in the modern context to social progressivism, and centrism is usually applied to like economic centrism. And so a progressive centrist.
I don't agree with you. No, I don't. I think when people say
you think inherently incoherent to ascribe someone as a progressive centrist.
You don't think that progressive, the label, would apply to economics? Like, you don't think that would apply to like social welfare programs?
Okay, I'm not saying that it cannot. What I'm saying is that there are notions of progressive centrism that are applicable and that make sense, that don't automatically show that you're bad faith. Someone could say, yeah, he's like a progressive centrist. Like, he definitely is. He's, for example, Andy Bashir might be described this way, right? He's woke on trans issues, but he's not like this a Medicare for all or die kind of person, right? So all I'm just saying is the concept by itself is not incoherent. You need to do additional work to show that the person is trying to be contradictory or is contradictory and therefore being bad faith. And so the reason I say this is to say that by itself, it is not a contradiction.
But I think at this point in the conversation, Pisco, I think like once it became obvious, and it was obvious in my opinion right away, that she hadn't even really like thought about how she would answer that question. She hadn't really thought about like a coherent reason, like why that label would apply to Giuliana. Like, I think at this point that had already been like very firmly exposed. It was to me. And I got the sense, like knowing our audiences, that they probably picked up on that too. And so at that point, I'm not going to waste my time buying into this nonsense argument of like, well, you know, I guess Bernie can be a centrist when you think about it, because I don't think she's coming at it in good faith. Like, you can make that argument. You can sort of, you know, that would be like a very like hyper niche. You would have to be like really engaged in politics to kind of follow your track. And maybe there's some merit there, but that's clearly not where she was going with this.
On immigration. If I told you Bernie was a centrist on immigration, would you understand what I'm saying?
I suppose I would understand what you're saying, but I think she had demonstrated through her language and through our conversation that she was not approaching it in the same way that you are right now. She was not, she was looking for like an escape valve. Like, she was looking for like an out in that conversation. And she had backed herself into it. And she had backed, well, if you agree with that, then I don't understand. Like, I think most people that was watching understood that. I think our audience understood that. So I don't understand why I would waste time, you know, like unpacking it in the way that you're describing. It's just such a waste of time.
I'm not saying that unpacking it in this precise way is what would work. What I'm suggesting is the following, and only the following. Let's not linger on the truth or falsity about whether Giuliana is or is not a centrist in some like objective sense. Let's use whatever bullshit she's going to throw out there. Let's just accept it. Let's accept what the term that she's going to use, and we'll be able to shut her down with her own terminology. So if she says that centrist means, you know, like a Manchin type, you can destroy her on the facts. You didn't even do the bare amount of research on Giuliana. How can you say this? If she says, well, no, by centrist I mean Schumer aligned or Biden aligned or something like that, then you can, you know, call into question how she's using the term centrist.
I did do that though. But I did 100%. I did do that. I did absolutely question like the application of the language that she was using as inconsistent, like as incoherent, like by that point, like I don't even remember if you had jumped in by this point. I think it was before she claimed that pro-centrist was pro-democrat, like, which is just ridiculous. Like that, like everything she was, my point is, like, she said like 4 or 5 different things.
Ridiculous, what do you mean? It's ridiculous that
I'm not going to explain that to you. I'm not going to explain that to you. I don't need to explain ridiculous to you, bro. Come on.
Well, no, not the word necessarily, but like what you're
as
saying
it applies in this context.
No one would ever use the term that way.
You know what that word means in this context. I don't need to explain that to you.
No, I'm asking what you think is ridiculous. The notion that someone could use the word centrist to mean aligned with Democrats?
Yes, to be pro-Democrat, centrist. Nobody uses the word that way. First of all, nobody uses it that way. Literally nobody uses it.
Lefties, which by your own account, right? This is she's a lefty. Lefties do use the term that way.
No, they would say like no, that they would not use it in that way. That's way too broad. Way too broad. Because technically they're pro-Democrat. They're like pro, Mamdani and pro.
Do you agree with that? I thought you said that they're not pro-Democrat. They're anti-Democrat.
No, using that ridiculous language is my point. That would make them pro-Democrat if they're like pro-Mamdani, right?
Well, no, I thought that you just said that even lefties wouldn't use centrist to mean Democrat aligned because they're pro-Democrat and they wouldn't call themselves centrist. But I thought your whole contention is that
they wouldn't stop it at just pro-Democrat. That's just so broad. It's so absurdly broad. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody uses the language like that.
I feel like people, lefties, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
What is your instinct here? I swear,
liberal.
I feel like you're going into lawyer brain here. Like, what is your instinct in this moment to like defend that? You want to find a way. You
defend
like
what?
Your brain is like when we're unpacking this stuff, and I feel like you've done this with like previous actors that I've considered to be bad faith. You're like stretching yourself to find the most charitable read of the things that they're saying, past the point that they've demonstrated that they're being good faith. That's what I get confused about sometimes.
I'm not trying to extend to Taylor Lorenz a assumed branch of good faith. That's exactly what I'm not trying to do. Okay. I'm trying to say whether or not something has been demonstrated in virtue of like the arguments and the inferences that one can reasonably draw from. And if you say, well, you should assume bad faith of Taylor Lorenz, then fine. Okay. It's self-evident that she's bad faith. It's self-evident. You already proved it when she was like not quick and didn't really think about it or whatever. And so everything else, it's all fair game. But I thought we were trying to assess whether you demonstrated something or not.
No, I understand.
Whether you demonstrated something.
I understand what you're saying because like, I personally assumed bad faith, like going into that conversation. That's what I wanted to expose. Maybe not 100%. Okay. Would I bet my life, but 95. But I didn't assume that the audience would make that same assumption in the same way that I did, which is why I picked the particular line of questioning that I did, because I wanted to kind of guide her down a path. And my position is that by the time you interjected in the way that you did, I had already done that. Like she had already like hung herself a bit with her own language. But you're saying, so no, in an effort to make your argument sharper, you should have, like conceded her definition here but I'm saying like at that point I think it was obvious to most people that were watching that what she was presenting was not quite lining up. It didn't really make sense. So I assumed that, and then
I'm not saying that. I think that there's a difference between you personally assuming bad faith and you entering the argument and being bad faith. Okay, so I'm not saying that you were being bad faith in the argument. I probably do agree that you assumed that she was bad faith beforehand based on previous encounters or whatever, or your pre-existing notions. And I'm not even calling that into question with regard to the chorus article. As you know, that like, I agree with a lot of the conclusions on the chorus article. And I also think that the framing point that you guys are making are right. So I don't dispute the conclusions. All right. I'm trying to make a statement regarding what my perception was, why I was interjecting. And you can say you had already demonstrated it to any reasonable person's satisfaction that she was bad faith at the time I interjected. I mean, I'll have to go back and see exactly when I interjected or whatever. I remember being incredibly frustrated with like circling on whether Olivia Giuliano was in fact a centrist. That's what I remember motivating me to speak about. Like, oh, dude, this is fucking dumb. Like, what? Like, can we just like focus on her and focus on her framing? Like, I even say in there, like, let's focus on whether she was being bad faith. Let's ask her.
That's what I did, though. That. I feel like I did that. When I asked her, like, what do these labels mean to you, and what was your process for like how to assign that, and like, it really didn't take her long before she started squirming. It was like 5 or 10 minutes into the conversation, she was like, editors use language sometimes, and it's like, even though she's using that exact same language in her tweets afterwards, like she was already like really struggling in that moment, I think. And so when you jumped in the way that you did, it was like, I had a list of other descriptors that I wanted to get to, but we got bogged down on that, I think, in no small part because you were interjecting. Like I wanted to, I wanted to get to
that, but
well, I mean, so like, I mean, like I have like a whole like notes of prep here, and there was this other influencer named Barrett Adair who she described as pro DNC, and when I went to their TikTok, it was like, I don't know what the fuck that label means here.
But like, you're saying like I prevented you from raising that? Like,
yeah, when you interjected the way that you did. Well, we don't. I mean, it's a 2-hour podcast. I also didn't want. I didn't want to take up the whole thing. Like I didn't think it would go literally into the 2-hour mark. But you know, I did have like a list of other things. And when you interjected, it's like you're asking me like yes or no. Does Biden call himself a centrist? And I'm like,
yeah. So this is to show. So do you? So you're saying like I'm frustrating what you want to do in the moment.
Yeah.
And what I want to do in the moment, that takes like a backseat to what you want to do in the moment. And therefore that means I'm trying to protect Taylor. Like what I want to do in the moment is call out what I think is like a bad like focus, which is on like the truth or falsity of the underlying claim. And you're like, you shouldn't have done that because you distracted me, you did this, you wasted too much time. Like I don't understand, or you were doing this to defend her. And you don't think it
was worthwhile to flesh out if she was being if she had a different kind of agenda when she was using those descriptors?
I absolutely think it was worth time doing that. I want to be clear about that. I do think it's worth time on that point. What I'm saying is not that is a waste of time. What I'm saying is how one demonstrates that point isn't by fighting on the truth or falsity of whether she is in fact a centrist. That's what I'm saying. Just accept what she's going to say. Like, what did you mean by this? Okay, I meant this. And then use that to demonstrate your point. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to derail from the point of bad faith. That's what I wanted to concentrate on. And if you go back to the actual transcript of what I said, you'll see that that's what I say. Let's not focus on this. Let's focus on the accusation of bad faith.
Do you think
it's the direct opposite of what you're implying?
Do you think that Olivia is a centrist? Would you call her a centrist?
It depends on what sense.
Just you. I'm just asking.
In the sense of
however you want to interpret it.
It's different. It's a different answer, right? It depends is the answer. And what sense? I don't know why this is like,
but whatever you want, you know, like by a reasonable standard, a colloquial standard.
There are multiple reasonable
definitions. Pick one and go with it. I don't know. Like the reason I asked is because like I got the sense that you maybe thought she was a centrist, so you kind of agreeing with Taylor. It
depends
on
in what sense. And some. So first of all, I don't know enough of her political views to know on some of the senses of centrist. So I'll give you some examples. So in the sense of overall political ideology in the world of ideologies, yes, she's a centrist. I assume anyone who's vaguely, represented by the Democratic Party is a centrist on that view. On the view of the internal. What?
I want to unpack that. What do you mean? Like, so what do you know about her? That is it literally that she has stumped for Democrats?
So it's because the Democratic Party is, in the grand scheme of ideologies, in the full sense of ideologies, from fascism to communism and Marxist-Leninists, the Democrats are considered a centrist party. That's in what sense. And so being aligned with a Democrat on that view, on that sense, is centrist.
No.
And so in that view, I would say,
I don't think so. I don't agree with that at all. Like you center left, I mean, maybe that's defensible, but not centrist. No, the Democratic Party of 2026 is centrist across like the whole span of human history.
Ideology.
I don't think so. No, when you look at the Democrats' policy agenda, like, no, I don't think so. I don't agree with that. So, but maybe that's
the Democrats are aligned with business interests. They are not in favor of command economy by and large.
What is that? They're aligned with business interests. What does that mean? I mean, like, what about Lena Khan? Like, that was like the most pro-consumer, like pro-labor administration in like fucking 3 decades.
I'm not making normative claims here that being aligned with business is bad. I want Democrats to have good relationships with business. I'm a capitalist. Okay.
Do you mean pro-capitalist?
Don't read in. Yes, that's what I mean. I mean that they're aligned with private businesses. They want private-public partnerssi. They're interested in market-oriented solutions first. They're
how would that be centrist?
Some regulation.
How would be not wanting to end capitalism? How is that centrist?
So I understand centrists as is used in the ideological sense to be economic centrism. Economic centrism referring to the amount of controls in on the economy. Is where being on the right is like more anarchic, right, and less business control. And I understand left to be a lot of control over the economy, a lot of regulatory stuff. And so in that sense, right, the Democratic Party is oriented towards market solutions by and large. They're in favor of regulation on some things, but their default assumption is to try to find public partner
on many things. I mean, that's what abundance was all about. Like the Democratic Party, when you give the Democratic Party a trifecta at the state level, isn't abundance about like ending the what they consider to be like burdensome regulation, over regulation, maybe?
Yeah, no, I think that there is a sense in which abundance can be construed as in favor of some amount of deregulation, though I would hasten to add, and also I think Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein have added, that it's not just deregulate. But abundance is kind of neither here nor there. I'm just trying to like orient myself towards how people, from the political science perspective, from like an ideological perspective, I agree there's other senses in which the Democratic Party is in no means a centrist party. I'm trying to say that there's different senses of centrist. And when you map on like political ideologies ranging from anarcho-capitalism on the one end to command economies on the other hand, the Democratic Party by and large is in the center. That's what is meant by that in the economic sense. I mean, economic centrism. They're in favor of some regulation, but overall they're in favor of markets. And they're not, by and large, it's not a socialist party. So that's just what that version of centrism means, economic centrist. Do you get me?
I do.
That's one vision. That's one vision of centrist, and it's right, not one that's like super narrow, or like this is a common notion among like political science shit, that this is like in the center of that axis.
That's where I think we disagree, because I think political scientists would very, very, very broadly describe the Democratic Party as pretty firmly center left, even economically in 2026. I think you're describing the label centrist from the perspective of a lefty. I think that's what you're doing, right? I think your academic view of it, you're saying like political scientists would consider the Democratic Party to be centrist economically. I think that would make more sense in like the 90s. But the party has changed a lot in the 21st century. It has moved away from a lot of their more economically like centrist positions. Like I would say like the Democratic Party now is like, I think it's like closer like well, I mean like the whole party overall I would say has like shifted pretty significantly to the left in the 21st century.
I agree, so I think that they've shifted left. I don't disagree with that at all. I'm not saying that what I'm just offering now is like the definition of centrist. I don't think that there's one definition of centrist or one notion of centrist that is correct. It just depends on which, like, words can have multiple reasonable meanings. And yes, even in the political context, this word is susceptible to multiple reasonable meanings. So in the so that's in the political what I would say like the political science sense and the ideological sense. There's two other senses that I've offered which are normal that a centrist can be applied, either to refer to the American political notion of centrist. And in the American political notion of centrist, I highly doubt that Olivia Giuliani is a centrist, because I think centrist in the American political context is closer refers to people like Manchin, people like Susan Collins, people like even probably Fetterman, more centrist in that sense. So that's the American political context. And then there's another sense of centrist, which is internal to the Democratic Party, which refers to divisions within Democratic Party, where Schumer, although in the American political sense would not be considered a centrist, in the internal division between the Bernieites and the more moderate types, Schumer would be plausibly referred to as a centrist in the internal party sense. That's just a referent, right? Centrist and moderate is a referential word. It refers to some sort of standard, some middle orientation of where people are at. And so those are three senses in which centrist can be used, one of which I think just trivially applies to Olivia Giuliani if she's at all related to the Democratic Party, and the one in which I'm not sure, which is the sense of the internal party, and then one in which I doubt it, which is the American political sense, with refers to like Manchin as a centrist. Those are all, I think, plausible senses of centrist.
Well, I did look. I didn't spend a great deal of time looking into Olivia Giuliani. I was somewhat familiar with her before, but I did peruse her feeds before I did all this. And what I get from her is that she is just a standard Gen Z progressive that cares about like just really boilerplate Gen Z stuff. But she also wants the Democratic Party to win from a pragmatic perspective. And so to me, like, her ideology is very, very clearly not centrist. And any reasonable person.
In what sense?
I get a little frustrated sometimes.
How are you frustrated? It depends in what sense. It depends on what you mean by centrist.
I mean, colloquially. I think I even mean within the Democratic Party. Like, even if you wanted to restrict it to just the Democratic Party, I think she's very obviously a progressive. Like,
yeah,
very obviously a progressive. But even like, and when you zoom out colloquially to, like, you know, just across the spectrum in the United States, she's a progressive there. You know, so
that's
like,
probably true too.
Right, and so, you know, that to me was quite obvious. And I think, like, the reason why I was pressing on whether or not the label applied to Juliana was twofold. Number one, I just factually thought it was pretty ridiculous. And number two, I thought that I suspected that she didn't assign that label because of ideology. I suspected that she assigned that label because she was trying to
I do too.
mark her for as a outside, mark her as like one of the enemies to the people that she was trying to appeal to with that article. And again, in my opinion, I think I had established that by the time you jumped in.
Okay, I'll revisit the conversation. That's not my impression. I will say though that, like,
she was flailing. She was flailing, like, really.
I think that there were points at which she was flailing. I think that's a different claim than whether or not in the moment you had demonstrated any given thing.
Really? I mean, so once somebody starts flailing in a debate, that's usually a pretty bad sign for them, I think.
I agree that it's usually a pretty bad sign if you're flailing, but I just mean whether you demonstrated something at a given time is different than whether or not someone is doing something very bad for themselves, including by flailing at a given time. She, I think, was uncomfortable with where the conversation was going, and that's probably true even just bringing up that topic, regardless of whether or not you've demonstrated a particular thing. And I will note, right, like, the colloquial sense of a word, I'm not sure that I have clarity on your view by what you mean when you say centrist. And because you seem to suggest that centrist means different things as applied to politicians versus that there's some kind of like indexing that is done that means that it means something different when you like apply it to politicians versus commentators. That's going to be an issue because, like, I'm not sure that that's apparent in a colloquial definition, that most people, when they hear centrist, construe it differently in politicians versus commentators. And then overall, I'm having not clarity on what you mean by centrist as a colloquial definition.
Well, walk me through real quick. Like, walk me through your thinking, your instinct, your impulse. Like, what drove you? Because I got frustrated when you jumped in, and I remember, like, trying to interrupt you, and just asking you, like, do you think that Taylor is using it in a pejorative sense? And that was born out of frustration because I think, you know, especially like, because that was early in that line of questioning that Soypill jumped in and he actually touched on something that I hadn't even really prepared in my preparation, which I should have in retrospect. I should have searched her Twitter feed for centrist, but he was pretty sharp, I thought. He jumped in like 5 minutes and he's like, well, Taylor, we can see with it. You obviously use the term in a pejorative way. And at that point, that's when she tried to back away and said, well, you know, editors use the language, like that ridiculous excuse that she gave. So, like, right then and there, I just feel like that, like, bam, like she's pretty nailed. Like, and if you agreed in that moment that Taylor uses the word centrist exclusively as a pejorative, and that informs our evaluation of like why she used it in that article, then I struggle to understand why you wouldn't jump in and join us in, like, you know, like in unpacking that.
I'm happy to answer that. Yeah. First of all, that's what I thought I was in, but I'm happy to answer that. I just want to be clear because I won't ask it again. Is it you don't want to address what I asked you about what is the centrist?
But I thought I did answer that question. Like, I think didn't I answer it like right when we first started?
You said moderate in some sense, but not in a sense that would apply to Obama.
I said it's more or less kind of synonymous with moderate for a lot of people. It could mean that somebody has a hybrid sort of set of policy prescriptions. Maybe they're pro-gun and pro like hawkish foreign policy, and then also like pro like strong social safety nets. You know, like yeah. I think that's what most people understand when they hear that word.
If that's what you mean by centrist, that like a kind of moderate that might have a hybrid solution to things. then it's not clear to me that Juliana is not a moderate.
But you just, what do you know? Well, what do you know about her?
I'm not saying that I know that she is a moderate. I'm saying it's not clear to me that she's not a moderate on that view of centrist.
Didn't you say that you don't know much about like her politics?
I'm not claiming that she's a moderate. I'm saying it's not clear to me that she's not a moderate. You understand that?
Well,
I don't have a strong view. I don't have a strong inclination.
But that's because you don't know anything about her politics, though.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Is it's not clear to me that she is or is not a moderate on that view.
I'm confused right now. So I just like at that point, wouldn't it be on you to just like peruse her feed or whatever? I mean, I'm
not disputing the factual accuracy of the claim. That's what I'm saying is like, that's what I'm claiming.
But
is the waste of time.
I interjected. I said, well, first of all, she self-identifies as a progressive. She was an executive.
But moderates can be progressive. On your own view, moderates can be progressive.
No, I don't. No, I don't. Wait, hold on. Moderates can be progressive. No. Hang on.
You're using centrism as a synonym for moderate.
No, but you're describing
moderate everywhere actions, you put centrist.
No, now you're stretching the word to mean like individual actions are moderate or centrist or progressive. I'm talking about her label. Like her, what people think of when they think of her.
I'm just inserting moderate for centrist. If you're saying it's essentially synonymous, more or less, then it's not clear to me that moderates can't be progressive. That's what I mean. I'm substituting the word centrist for moderate. If on your view, the colloquial meaning of centrism is moderate.
No, we're not talking about actions, Pisco. We're talking about the label. She didn't label Olivia Giuliani's actions as centrist. She called Olivia a centrist. So we're not.
By which you think the colloquial definition is a moderate, right?
It is very much related to being a moderate. I'm not sure if it's like 100% synonymous, but it's decently synonymous.
Kind of moderate.
Yes,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So we can insert by just transitive property. We can just insert everywhere there's centrist, moderate for the meaning of the term. Understand that the implication is different between moderate and centrist. But on that view, right? If what you mean by centrist is moderate, and the claim therefore is that accepting at good faith and not assuming bad faith, which again we can dispute about that, then we can just say, well, Olivia Giuliani is a moderate. And on that view, it's like it's not clear to me that that's in conflict with progressive, and that you saying, well, she's
no.
progressive here.
No. Come on, you're losing the thread here.
What am I doing?
You're losing the thread here,
Why?
But like because
Why?
Especially in the way that like you would agree that Taylor Lorenz, when she used that language centrist for Juliana, she was delineating her. That was like she didn't land on that label by accident. She was trying to communicate something to her readers with that label. And what you're doing with the words now is you're really kind of stretching them and kind of making them meaningless. Well, anybody could be a moderate when you think about it, right? That's kind of what you're doing, right?
Terminology.
No, but that's what you're doing, Pisco. You're saying like really at the end of the day, like anybody could be a moderate. And so that is like running cover for her use of that language. Whether or not it's what you intended, that's what you're doing though.
So I'm not trying to step into the meta right now. I'm not using a definition that's so loose that it could apply to reasonably everyone. I asked you what you think the colloquial definition of moderate is, such that it's so apparent that there's a contradiction in what Taylor was saying. So I'm not using anyone's sense in this context of moderate or of centrist other than your own. Okay, and I'm regardless of what my
but according to my definition, Olivia Giuliani is not a moderate. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, and she's not a moderate. Got it.
No, I don't think she is. No.
All right. But why is that in contradiction with progressive? Help me out there, because that's the kind of the claim that she contradicted herself and she proved that she was lying is because she called her a centrist, and centrist means moderate, and then she's previously called her a progressive. And so if we're going by those definitions, there needs to be some contradiction or some kind of like tension between moderate and progressive.
Pisco, I think you've lost the plot here a little bit. I think the tether's cut and you're kind of floating around in outer space. Because you're asking me,
why are you saying that, man? I think that's disrespectful. What do you mean?
Well, I'm trying to be direct with you because you've now reached a point where you're like, well, you have to establish that there's a difference between moderate and progressive, and it's a political podcast. So I'm
not saying that you should have done it.
What are we doing?
Ben,
like this does not need to be explained to our audience that you have to establish there's a difference between moderate and progressive. No, I don't. I don't need to explain that. That is firmly understood by everybody who's watching.
I'm trying to understand in your view, right? Like, I'm not saying that you need to do the conversation in this way and suss out this difference between moderate and centrist. I'm trying to follow your train of thought and showing. And you said that it was obvious by that time that
you're not trying to find my train of thought. You're bogging the conversation down to like, now you got to demonstrate that progressives and moderates are different. Like, if you're following my train of thought, then I don't need to do that. That's ridiculous.
Well, then I'm not sure in virtue of what Taylor Lorenz was discredited when she called her a centrist in one breath and called her progressive in another, unless there's some basis on which to determine that is an indication of bad faith. I think you would need to show that.
So you're saying that Taylor Lorenz, and it wasn't just that she called her progressive, by the way. It was in 2023, the exact quote, like, it wasn't just like, so the person asked her, so let me just bear with me. Let me read a paragraph here. So she was in an interview with someone. Don't know the full context of this, but she says, this is Taylor. Oh boy, I would start by engaging with people. And I assume this is a conversation about democratic outreach with influencers. She says, oh boy, I would start engaging with people, not just approved content creators. I think one thing that specific political parties, especially like liberal politicians, have really shied away from is engaging with more progressive activists because they want to stick to these neutral party lines. And I get that, but I think to perform well on the internet, you've got to engage with everyone. I'd be dealing with Twitch streamers and content creators, and I would really go out and use social media to try to engage with people, and especially these progressive influencers on the internet. I wouldn't say we're just not dealing with those people because they're too radical or they're too progressive. I would try to bring them into the fold and use them to my advantage. And then her interviewer says, would this include Olivia Juliana? And Taylor Lorenz says, yeah, I think people like her are exactly who we're talking about. These Gen Z activists and commentators and people with followings. So this was just like a couple of years before she wrote that article. And then in our conversation, she was claiming, well, that's how she self-identified. But when I looked it up, the last time Olivia Juliana self-identified as a centrist was in 2020, according to her social media feed. So I just think Taylor was just being dishonest about this. I just think she was being blatantly.
She was lying about what?
What do you think?
What's the lie?
I'm asking you. What do you think? What do you think?
I'm not sure is my answer.
You're frustrating me, my good sir.
You
are my boy, and I love you.
You're
my boy. I love you, and you're my boy. But in the conversation with Taylor, I think that we fleshed out that even she understands that there's a difference between an understanding when somebody calls somebody a centrist or a progressive.
I agree that they're different concepts. I'm asking what the lie is that you're identifying. You said that she's.
I'm
asking what she's lying about.
Are you suggesting that in Taylor's, like, it's conceivable to you that in Taylor's use of language in her lexicon, that she could somewhat fluidly and plausibly shift between labels like centrist, moderate, liberal, progressive, and they all could kind of apply to like everyone?
No, I'm not alleging that.
Okay, so you understand that Taylor understands that there's like a difference in these words, and so she's communicating different things with these words.
I agree that they're different words and they communicate different things. Yes, I agree with that, and I think that Taylor probably agrees with that.
So I don't know why you're making this effort to justify her use of the language.
I'm not trying to
moderate. No, but that's what you're doing when you say, "Well, can't a moderate be a progressive?" That's what you're doing.
No, I'm asking you what you're identifying as the lie.
The lie is that Olivia Juliana is a centrist. That's the lie.
Okay. And it's a lie in virtue of her having called her a progressive before. That shows that it's a knowing intentional falsehood.
That, right? With all the other pieces of evidence that we've compiled in this trial,
So it's not enough. So in other words, are you suggesting, is it enough to know that she called Olivia Juliana a progressive before to know that she's lying about calling her a centrist now?
Not necessarily, but when you weigh that up against the fact that Juliana herself,
not necessarily. So we agree on that, right? So,
no, but I didn't do that, Pisco. I established like multiple pieces of evidence. I didn't just focus on that. I appealed to, I don't know, 6 or 7 different things, like Taylor's previous language.
Given that it's not enough, given that it's not enough to identify that she's previously called her a progressive and she now called her a centrist and know that she's lying, it must mean that it's possible to be a progressive and a centrist on your own view, not on my view, on your view.
No, you could explain the discrepancy in different ways. You could say that her thinking on Olivia evolved. No, I don't accept your premise that you can be both moderate and progressive in the way.
No. I'm saying that's an entailment of your view. If you think that it's not enough to say
the view,
so for example,
everybody thinks this way. I mean, maybe I'm projecting here, but
regardless of whether everyone thinks this way, okay, then it applies to everyone, including you. All I'm just saying is, on your view, right? I thought I just heard you say that it's not enough to show. It's basically in combination with other things that you're able to assess out that she's lying about the centrist point, including the progressive point, including the fact that she called her progressive previously. In other words, they're not contradictory innately, right? Just to be a progressive is not mutually exclusive with being a centrist. I think that's entailed on your own view, on your view.
No, it is. Okay. It is for our purposes. Yes, maybe for someone who is a normie and has no fucking idea about politics but in our spaces, between you and me on the podcast, me directly with Taylor, our audience, all of us understand these words to be different descriptors that mean different things.
Because centrist means moderate, and moderates can't be progressives, right?
When we're using you keep doing the thing, Pisco. You're now.
I'm using your sense of the word centrist.
No. But you're changing the word. You're changing the word from a descriptor about the person, and you're stretching it to be a descriptor about their actions. And so you're saying, well, a moderate can do progressive things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
I'm talking about
language,
I'm talking
labels,
about identity. I'm only talking about
people.
identity. I'm only talking about identity here.
Yes.
I'm not talking about actions.
No.
So
But
I want to be clear about
you are though. You're saying a progressive can do moderate things. That's like a label about their actions.
I understand that before I asked whether Bernie Sanders can be centrist in some more narrow sense. That's not what I'm doing right now. I'm asking if you are, that is to say, identify as a moderate, is it incompatible colloquially for you to identify as a progressive?
Yes. As a holistic
and
label.
Why?
Yes. I'm not going to explain this. I refuse. I simply refuse. I'm not going to explain.
There's no good explanation.
I am not going to explain to you.
What's the explanation?
I'm not going to explain to you why, especially in our circles, that you cannot call yourself both a progressive and a moderate. Not for these purposes.
Why not? I don't know why.
Because we're talking about a defining label, Pisco. A label. These things.
Yeah, why can't I identify as both a moderate and a progressive?
I am not going to do this with you. Let me get some water. Hold on. Colloquially, in our spaces, we simplify things to especially in the Democratic Party. There's like various sub factions, but colloquially we kind of understand it to there to be a kind of a like two different camps. You have like the progressive Bernie camp, and then you have like the moderate like centristy camp. That's how these things are discussed in these circles. Yeah. You know, there's also like a smaller kind of 20-15% that are, you know, somewhat conservative, right? Like black voters are typically more conservative, but like colloquially when we have these kinds of discussions.
Wait.
That's how we do these kinds of things. Can I just give you an olive branch there? Yeah, you know,
this is one of the senses in which I'm referring to. I would agree in the sense of internal political division in terms of the Democrats. They are counterposed, right? The progressives are counterposed to the centrists in the sense of the internal Democratic alignment. Right? Yes, I would agree that it was kind of to say that you're a progressive centrist, progressive centrist or progressive moderate. If what you're referring to is this kind of internal Democratic thing, they would be counterposed. There would be a big amount of tension. There'd be like, what? Right? Like, hang on. There's the AOC wing, and then there's the Schumer wing, and they're not the same, right? And so then, in that context, yes, I would understand there to be a contradiction. But in other senses, I don't see them as contradictions. So that's why I'm saying that the context really matters. And whether you're referring to the overall American. Which part of it do you question?
Have you ever heard someone be described or self-describe as a progressive moderate or a moderate progressive?
Yes. You can have multiple identities. You can say I'm a progressive. I'm also a moderate. Yes.
Whomst have you heard that description? Who?
People in my personal life. There are people who identify people like Andy Bashir as a moderate progressive. He's a progressive and he's a moderate. Progressive meaning progressive socially.
Me personally, I have never, ever, ever heard these kinds of labels.
So
if I
Google progressive moderate, all right, so let me just try to find some instances of it and find an example of this being used to self-ID or to identify. What would that show if I'm able to demonstrate that?
It might show that like 2 people have done this. But I think your burden is to.
Okay.
Well, I think your burden, because this is what you're saying, your burden is to demonstrate that this is like something that is like commonly done or commonly understood, right? It's the internet. I can find people that are fucking, their kink is like watching zebras get covered in mayonnaise or whatever. That doesn't really matter much. Like, you would have to show that this is like, so, you know, everybody knows like you can be a progressive moderate, right?
All right, then I'm going to put that aside then. If I'm able to show that Olivia Giuliana has ever described herself as a moderate, would you then, on your own view, colloquially, would you concede that she's a centrist?
No. I would not.
Wait, how does that not logically follow by your own view?
Because people's politics can evolve, Pisco. They're fluid. Like if you described yourself as a moderate in 2020, like why would that be the basis if you're a journalist?
No, assume the same temporality.
Why would that be?
Assume the same. Assume that she did. Assume that she has at one point described herself as a moderate, and that's like after the whatever development phase, right? Like after whatever what you're calling the development.
You're always developing is my point. Like there's, it's, you know, you're not like stuck in stone after a while. People change their politics into their 40s. And again, like when I looked at her Twitter account, I found a tweet from her in 2020, specifically rejecting the label of a centrist. Like specifically like rejecting that label. Hold on. It was a tweet from her in 2021. And she said, when this pandemic started, I was a centrist Democrat who was going to college for English. Didn't realize how much could change in 18 months. So this is her explicitly distancing herself from that label. Just unequivocally. September 26, 2021. She said, when this pandemic started, I was a centrist Democrat who was going to college for English. Didn't know how much could change in 18 months. And then there was another tweet from her where she was talking about like expressing frustration.
That indicates that she's now like very different than that, as opposed to
very obviously that's what it says. Don't pick that apart. Don't debate bro that one. That's very obviously what she's saying there. And then she she could be referring
to
no, don't do it. Don't do it. Stop it.
Well, I'm telling you, no, Hutch, this is kind of something I have to make the point I want to make, right? If I want to make a point, you got to let me make the point, right?
Well, can I read you another tweet before you make the point? Can I read you another tweet?
Why can't I just make, why can't I address what you just said?
I'm further making the case. I'm just going to head off your argument. Like this is how your brain works, Pisco. Like you see this, like
I just want to do it one by one.
You just like impulsively you have to like explore the thing, and I'm just telling you, like I have a tweet. I have another tweet to show that she is assigning herself the progressive label.
Okay. Show me that. Yeah, give me that. No, but that's the whole thing that we're like disputing, right? It is whether
you're disputing it. I'm not. I'm saying she's a progressive. You're disputing that. And by progressive, you mean as counterpoise to moderate, right? I'm not going to continue to explain.
Respond to that?
No, I'm not going to, because we've already been down that road. I've already explained it. She said,
okay, I mean, if you don't want to hear the argument, that's
she said, you say I'm not a progressive, yet I have very progressive stances. I believe in a robust public option with Medicare available to all. I believe in free community colleges and trade schools. I believe that we need more immigration judges, more work permits, more visas, comprehensive, clear pathway to citizenship, and so on and so forth, and on and on and on. Like she's saying, like in this tweet, she's saying like, you don't call me a progressive, and then lists all her progressive bona fides. So like clearly she self-identifies and has for years as a progressive. And Taylor's whole thing was like, well,
mutually exclusive of moderate.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In every context, in the colloquial context.
No, in our context, Pisco, like you could find a context where whatever, but in our context, for our purposes, in this conversation, in the conversation with Taylor, they are mutually exclusive terms.
So let's deal with Biden. Let's deal with Biden. All right. So this is why I brought up the Biden example.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Biden, you would agree, is a moderate.
I would agree that Biden ran on a moderate aesthetic in 2020, but also at the same time did run on progressive policies.
I didn't ask if he ran on it. I'm asking him the identity. Is he? I'm not equivocating. So in the same sense that Olivia Giuliana is a moderate or not a moderate, was Joe Biden a moderate?
I think colloquially, people would probably call Biden a moderate. Sure.
Okay. And by moderate, we mean centrist because they're
sure. Yes. Sure. Yes.
Okay. And was Joe Biden a progressive? Yes or no?
In practice, you mean?
No, I just mean as an identity. Would you identify him as a progressive? Yes or no?
I honestly don't even know. How did he self-describe? Hold on.
Regardless of how he does, do you understand what you just did? Right? Like if you say I don't know, you got a problem because on your view they're
I'm saying I don't. No, I'm saying I don't know how he like calls himself. But again, like the reason why I think like there is a different standard for politicians is because they're playing a different kind of game. And so somebody could intentionally give off the aesthetic of being a moderate if it meant, more electoral
I'm not asking
success
about that.
or something
I'm not
like
equivocating,
that.
right? I'm not equivocating. I'm asking in the same sense. I'm not asking in a different sense.
Okay,
so on your own
then
view,
how does this
Biden
apply? So how does this apply to the Olivia situation? What's the analog?
I'll tell
here?
you how, right? If it's possible for, on your view, for you to be unsure regarding whether Biden is a progressive, but to be sure that he's fairly called a moderate, then they're not necessarily contradictory. Because there's a world in which Biden can be both a progressive and a moderate. That's just logically entailed.
No. There's a world where, like, again, the word is applied in different ways for different considerations. But in our world,
I'm trying to use in the same sense.
In our world, in our conversation, I shouldn't have to explain to you that there are different factions of the Democratic Party. This is especially relevant in online discourse, where it's 10 times more tribalistic than in the real world. And so that when somebody says centrist, they are like, it's like you're trying to create a permission structure here, or you're trying to create an explanation for
I'm not.
Taylor.
I don't want to get into the meta, dude.
No, but that's what you're doing, though. You're trying
you're accusing me of being nefarious. You're saying that I have bad motive, malicious motive. That's what you're accusing me of.
No, I'm not saying you have a nefarious motive. I don't know what motivates you. All I can do
is you're trying to create a permission structure that's saying that I'm being malicious.
Well, I tried to clean up what I'm saying. I don't think it's quite a permission structure, but I think you're trying to explain Taylor's writing in a way that could be defensible when it's already firmly been established, in my opinion.
I agree with your conclusion, Hutch. So one thing is to agree on the conclusion. The other is to agree on the reasons why we agree on the conclusion, right? I can agree with your conclusion.
You're proposing that this was ambiguous to our audience. You're proposing that it would have been useful to, establish these things because our audience would have found it useful. But I'm saying, no, they wouldn't have. Like, they understand that when Taylor uses the word centrist, it is mutually exclusive with progressive or leftist or whatever. They already understand this. It doesn't need to be unpacked.
Just because they understand it doesn't mean that they have conceptual clarity or that they're correct, right? You can say you can appeal to any kind of.
That is what it means.
Appealing to a consensus is whatever. Like I will stand for my Merrick Garland opinion, and everyone could understand that I'm wrong, and everyone could say that I'm being unclear, and everyone can understand that I'm wrong about the Biden pardons or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're right. And so, okay, fine. They all understand something, but maybe they're wrong about that. And maybe we should think twice and not just rest on the fact that everyone agrees.
No. This isn't about being right or wrong on a particular thing. This is about the whole framework. And within the framework of the discussion, the context of the discussion, our audience understood that for Taylor Lorenz, the words centrist and moderate are mutually exclusive. We don't need to unpack, technically, Bernie would be considered a Nazi in fucking Denmark or whatever. Like, we don't
even
need
though she claimed otherwise.
We don't need
even though she claimed otherwise.
Who claimed otherwise?
Even though Taylor said that I don't consider them mutually exclusive.
She
says like progressive is a label that centrists use.
But at that point, why would we take that in good faith, Pisco? Why would we accept that?
You can say that I presuppose bad faith. You can say that. Then you're not demonstrating. You're assuming it.
No, she demonstrated bad faith, Pisco. She demonstrated it. When she passed the buck to her editors, when she gave an incoherent
I agree with that
definition. But so why do I need to establish it further? She did it for me. She exposed that herself. And so once that's out there, once somebody demonstrates bad faith, I don't know how you operate in a debate, but like once somebody demonstrates bad faith and you really got them like dead to rights, you can really drive that home. Like you can kind of hammer them on that.
I don't rest on you don't need to, and you can watch me engage with people seriously, like Tim Pool, Rob Noor, etc. And I usually do not just sort of presume that bad faith is accepted by everyone watching, and therefore not like try to demonstrate my claims or whatever. I continue to operate as though the interlocutor is operating in good faith. Maybe that's a failing on my end. Maybe that's just like not the appropriate thing to do. But
I don't. I think if you're in a debate with someone and you really caught them like really unambiguously being bad faith, I think from that point on you can operate from a completely different basis. If I'm having I know the difference. Like if I'm having a conversation with someone who's not going to like start lobbing ad homs or debate bro themselves into ridiculous positions. Like if I'm dealing with an honest interlocutor, the tenor, the tone of the conversation is completely different. Then it's an honest exchange of ideas. I'm more curious about what the person has to say. I'm more willing to explore those things and consider those things or challenge my own perspective. But as soon as I discover in a conversation with someone that they're operating in bad faith, something shifts in me, because that is like a on or off kind of thing. Like I don't think like there's no such thing as like a little bad faith. Like once someone demonstrates that they can be dishonest in that way, at that point it calls into question everything they say. And so why would I treat them?
No, I mean, yeah, if you put your like credibility in issue, and if you're acting a certain way, yeah, no, I understand that it might justify viewing them a different way or whatever. But like I'm just being honest with you and straightforward that like I don't operate, or I don't try to operate differently, except maybe to defend myself against possible like bad faith attacks or whatever. I will let you know though, and this is not just me trying to make an unfalsifiable claim or whatever, but there are a couple people, 2 people in my private life who watched that encounter are not dead ender communists and socialists, who are not like clued in on who Taylor Lorenz is, who like you are, or anything like, or like don't have like a strong foundation on like the overall drama, and they thought you were unhinged, and they thought that Taylor was like being bullied and stuff, and they didn't understand the point about the centrist thing. Now I understand that
I'm
is
okay
like,
with that. That's fine.
Okay. The only reason I say that is because it's very easy to assume that we're coming into this like with all the factual background that we have about Taylor Lorenz and how she treated this and how she treated Ethan Klein and whatever. And I'm conscious of not just the people who already agree with us. And I want us to be like good in our arguments and like foundationally, and maybe that's a bit obsessive, maybe that's whatever. And I don't have a problem with your conclusion. In fact, I thought that you exposed her wonderfully on the Israel primarily thing. There were some really tough moments, which I did not interrupt and which were brutal for her. But it wasn't my intention in the moments when I interrupted to fuck with your shit. I chimed in because I was like, this is dumb. And I think I know why it's dumb. And we don't have to go over and over on it again on it. And it doesn't have to do with the notion that she wasn't using centrist as a pejorative. I think that she almost certainly was. And I think that both you and Soypill did eventually demonstrate that. I had a slight issue, really slight in terms of like how it was presented and going around and around on the particular factual accuracy. And then on some of the other side points. But I don't think that should be meant to imply that I'm like, I don't agree with Chorus or that I'm just here to sweep for Taylor. That's not my intention. I just engage in the conversations the way I do, with the intention of being accurate. That's all. My brother in liberalism.
I'm just thinking,
yeah.
If I'm going into a debate with someone and I have a certain goal in mind, like there have been some debates that I've had where after the fact, I thought it was like more of a mixed bag, or some debates that I had where I thought it was just bad, some debates where I thought were stronger, but I never go into it with the hope that I'm going to convince literally everyone that's watching that debate that I'm correct about a thing or I've exposed something or something like that. And so, like, you know, the fact that you have a couple people in your life that thought that I was unhinged, I just kind of expect that. But I know the work that I put into that prep. I know the effort that I made during the conversation to not be belligerent or unacceptably like hostile. And I feel confident in my debate performance that night. Like I think I did a
listen. I think that overall
horrible for her. I thought that was horrible for her. And I just want to say real quick. I just want to say real quick, like I don't like that is a fundamental disagreement when it comes to a debate that you and I have, because it's hard for me to understand the instinct to jump in when you did after I think it was just really obviously exposed that she was not operating in good faith. Like at that point, like once somebody does that in the way that she was doing, and I want to stress, especially on this particular thing, because what she did, the way that I view what she did with her reporting after the fact, and the way that she intentionally breathed oxygen into, especially the Israel stuff, I thought that was morally like reprehensible, what she did. And I thought
to basically lambast
to accuse
Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, and these creators,
all of them
of being like shills and like covering up for genocide, essentially.
Yes.
That's the implication, right?
Yeah. I thought that was morally reprehensible. And so I don't, it's hard for me to understand your instinct in that moment to not just let the bad faith just be more and more, just, expose itself more and more during that conversation. Instead, you jumped in to like try to help her with the argument and try to help her defend herself. And
you're assuming that's what I was trying to do.
That is what you did. That is what you did.
Wait, when you said I did that, you're saying with the intent, right? Like you're saying you went to go help her.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm telling you now that my intent isn't just to help her. My intent is, number one, to express my view, right? To express what I think about a given issue. And so it's not couched in terms relative to Taylor. People, I know that's like bizarre that I could have my own thoughts that aren't necessarily, done with the intention of helping any particular person, but that, that is the case. And then also to streamline the conversation to an area that actually matters and that isn't just like talking past each other about the correct definition of centrists or like whether she is in fact a centrist, but just like accepting some semantic clarity in the nature of a conversation, which at least on its face should be conducted in good faith, even if we don't assume good faith on the interlocutor's part. So that wasn't my intention.
I believe I conducted myself in good faith. I don't think she did, but I don't think I don't think
I'm not saying that you conducted yourself in bad faith. It's not my view that you conducted yourself in bad faith. I'm just saying I am approaching the conversation with an attempt to get semantic clarity on this point about centrist, and not assuming that she's lying about, at least in the scope of the conversation, is to demonstrate that claim perhaps, and to focus us on the things that actually matter, which is the claim about bad faith, the claim about biasness. That's what I was trying to do. And it also expresses my frustration at that moment. So it's not done with an intent to just like give Taylor a pass. And again, I just want to come back to like, I don't know if you remember like the anger in my voice and when I debated this issue before, and when I was like really angry about the framing, etc., and all these same points. Why do you think I would just be trying to like toss Taylor a bone? You think I'm trying to like make money and grift and like what do you think I'm trying to do?
I truly don't make assumptions. All I can do is observe your patterns, and I'll reiterate again that I like sparring with you, and I actually think it makes for good content. Yeah. And like in our exchanges, I have to be a little bit more sharper, and so like I like appreciate that challenge and all that stuff. And so
it's not personal for me.
I genuinely mean that. I swear to you, I do not ascribe some nefarious intent. I get confused sometimes. Like that's where this comes from. I get confused because I don't understand the intent. So like if your intention in the moment was like, if the impulse in you in that moment was to help Taylor defend herself from something that I thought was indefensible, I'm not saying that you're doing that to like grift or whatever. I don't even know if you understand the impulse.
Why would I do that?
Well, I don't even know if you understand the impulse to do that in that moment. I don't know if it's just some autonomic response that you have because again, that's why I want.
I hear something and I'm like, this is dumb. Why are we talking about whether she's actually a centrist? Let's just accept. Let's just ask her what she means.
We were talking about it because I was establishing that Taylor meant something when she said that. That's why we were talking about that. Because I was just trying to establish with the audience that she knew what she was doing when she did that, and Soypill picked up on that. Like I didn't share notes with him or anything like that. Like he picked up on it like right away, and he expanded on it. And
I know the thing. I know the point. Right, the point is about the framing, etc. It's my belief that the focus on whether she's in fact a centrist or not isn't furthering the point. Now you could say I'm wrong about that. All right, let's just say that you say, okay, it is furthering the point because we can show that she lied, right? And if we show that she lied, of course, that's additional evidence of bad faith. And so there's something additional there that you're just wrong about that. But I can just tell you that's my intention. Like regardless of whether or not I still maintain that I do think that it's wrong to obsess over multiple reasonable construals of centrist, and where it's not clear what she's meaning, and that the better way is to just get her semantic on the table and just eviscerate her with it by, with whatever she means by it.
But why not jump? But why
even
not?
If you assume that that's not the case, yeah.
But why not jump in that at that point, and instead of interrogating me, why not just say like, why not just like explicitly encourage me, like, I think you've established this, get to the next point, instead of like, yes or no, Biden this, yes or no. It's like, and that's in that situation, like I'm in a mode, like I'm in a mode, and I feel like I'm in a really kind of advantageous position in that moment. Like you had a different read, I guess.
Maybe,
but like,
maybe the Biden point, maybe me raising the Biden point, on reflection, just like by the way we just did now, is exposing some potential tension in your own view, right? Like we just went this whole exchange, and you said you're not sure if Biden's a progressive, but you are sure he's a moderate, by which you mean centrist.
I think it's,
and so maybe the Biden question is uncomfortable because it's exposing some incoherence or perhaps some tension, right? Because even now we don't know if your view is that Biden is a progressive or not.
Well, I think the Biden view is necessarily more complex and nuanced than the kind of conversation we were having about Olivia Giuliana. Because if you would have asked me in 2019 or 2020, is Joe Biden a moderate? I would have been like, yeah. I mean, I was fully in the tank for Bernie until Super Tuesday, and I was really bummed when that happened, and I was not happy that he was the nominee, but I accepted it right away. And then over time, when I watched the way that he governed, I was like, holy fucking shit. Like, this is blowing my mind. Like, this is like my wet dream as a fucking 2001, 18-year-old me. If you would have told me that you would elect someone that would codify gay marriage, pass the largest climate bill ever, appoint someone like Lena Khan to her position, and, like the ARP.
So why do you hesitate to call him a progressive?
Well, I just explained it to you. Do you understand? Like, I had this like firmly embedded idea of who I thought he was, or
no,
who,
but I'm asking
he
you
presented
now,
himself.
right? Like, I'm asking. But the thing is, like, if you accept that now he's a moderate.
Well, I tried to explain it to you.
I'm not asking.
But you did the yes or no thing, and I tried to explain it to you because I think that deserves nuance. I think.
Forget like, everything I've ever said. Have you ever seen the Key and Peele where he's like, forget everything I've ever said right now. I want a stork ankle and a human foot. All right. Forget everything that we said up until now, right? Okay. Right now, do you consider Joe Biden a moderate?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm sensitive to what the audience, like, that's what colors my perspective. Like if I say that, like, I have to make that case. And so maybe there's some hesitation there, but like, I don't think he governed as a moderate. I think he fucking he was elected and he fucking channeled the spirit of fucking LBJ and FDR, but he was limited, he was limited, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, and I think what you're experiencing is totally normal. Like, it feels weird to not call Biden a moderate. Why? Because
it's a truism.
Like, there's just this very strong notion that Biden is a moderate.
It's a truism.
And there's some evidence that suggests that he is a moderate, right?
But there are good reasons for that. There are good reasons for that in ways that I don't think apply to the Giuliana thing. I don't think there are good reasons if you made any effort to like look into her own language, how she has evolved over time. She didn't do that. I thought it was kind of astounding that Taylor was like, well, she herself, called herself a centrist years ago. It's like, why does that matter? Like, if you chose it, you could have just chosen a different label. You could have just not chosen centrist. If you weren't familiar with how her politics have evolved to the point they are now, why would you choose that label? That's crazy to me that you would do that as a journalist, especially for someone who's young. When you're young like Giuliana, like, people's politics change a lot from the time they're 20.
I understand the changing point. Yes. Yeah. And I understand how people could like, okay, he was a moderate, he's not anymore, or he has moderate vibes, but he's not really a moderate, right? So there are ways in which you can make that just like here. But here's like, I think the problem: you wouldn't look twice at an article that said Joe Biden's a moderate. He's a moderate Democrat.
I would. No, I would. I would.
Really?
Yes, 1,000%. Yes.
I don't even think it would be of note. But maybe you're wrong. Maybe I could be totally wrong.
I would. I swear to you, I would. I mean, like, I talk about my chat. I repeat myself a lot in chat, but like, I talked about this all the time when Biden was president. Like, holy fuck, like, this guy's way more progressive than I thought he would be. That was like the tone of the Biden years.
Okay.
For me.
Well, look, I hear you. I think that it's possible for, in different contexts, Biden to be a moderate, and in different contexts for him not to be a moderate. So I don't think that Biden is a moderate when it comes to the overall look at the country politically. Okay. I would agree with you there that he is not a moderate on that view. When it comes to the view of like
but that's what Taylor
the internal.
No, but hang on. Before we even get to that, we don't even need to get to that. Do you acknowledge that Taylor, when she spoke about our article, I specifically asked her this because I wanted her to commit to this because I felt like it really weakened her position. Like I asked her, like, do you think your opinion is present in this? That's why I asked her, like, you mentioned before that if you're going to do journalism, you should disclose your partisan leanings. But how does that apply to you? Should you put that in your should you put it in your article? Like, that was the point of that questioning. Because I was trying to get her to say that her reporting was not like opinion based and that it was neutral, which she did. And then once she did that, then at that point, that gave me a lane to really hit on her for the descriptors that she used. There were literally like 7 other descriptors that I wanted to get to besides centrist. I thought I skipped a lot of them because the pro-Israel stuff I thought was more punchy.
And I thought you made a great progress, and you really exposed stuff with that line of attack. I thought that was very effective. So, I'm not even claiming that all of your attacks are ineffective.
Right,
I'm noticing a singular problem that I thought was apparent to me. And at least, even if you don't agree with my assessment there, that's what I identified. That's what I was trying to get to. That's why I interrupted. But
so in the context of Biden, you want to explore the terms moderate, progressive in different contexts. From the perspective of like the whole world and human history, the United States, just the Democratic Party. We don't need to do that with Taylor's because her whole thing was like it was supposed to be just neutral, politically neutral, supposed to be like even ground. So I think that as far as your 3 examples, that would mean like across the country. I think that would be like acceptable, like that specific framing. And when you use that,
right. And if she says that, that's actually like stupid, right? Because she's not, right? Then you would say she's not, or that isn't what you meant, right? And but then you like you get the clarity on the view right there, right? And you're like, wait, when you say moderate, you mean with respect to the whole country? And if that's what you mean, then like, wait, she is far more left wing than most of the country. If that's what you mean by moderate, and so this can't be true. Then you can actually do the accuracy point correct.
No, but
once you have the grounding for it, right?
But
where you laid it out.
But isn't that what she means when she says not injected with opinion?
No. Because she as I remember it, and maybe I'll go back and we'll see it. She offered, I think, 2 conceptual ways in which to consider what she claimed was the centrist label. One was by self-ID, in terms of how one identifies, right?
She was wrong about that.
Test. And well, that presupposes a meaning, right? Like you can't just say she's wrong. She's wrong in virtue of like you have to say she's wrong because they're counterposed. They're
no. Again, she was wrong that Juliana self-ID'd as centrist. She was wrong about that.
Well, no, you said that she did at some point, right?
Who cares? We're talking about today, like currently, past 2021. Since 2021, she has self-ID'd as a progressive. It wasn't that she was wrong on the substance. She was wrong about the claim. It's not true. Juliana does not self-ID as a centrist.
And that's apparent because she identifies as a progressive on your view, right?
I showed you. I read you the tweet. Like she distanced her explicitly.
And then you're like,
herself.
don't talk about another reading of that statement. And then I didn't because you asked me not to.
Pisco.
And then
we're establishing whether or not what Taylor said was correct. What Taylor said was correct. What Taylor said was Olivia Juliana self-IDs as a centrist.
But that's what her understanding was. Yes.
No, she was. Well, was it her understanding? Whatever. She was wrong about that.
That's what she claims her understanding is. And she's wrong in virtue of what? She's wrong in virtue of what?
Pisco.
Why is she wrong?
Pisco. She's what? I don't want to get feisty with you, buddy, but I'm getting feisty with you a little bit here.
Yeah, why is she wrong?
What you tell me why she's wrong.
Well, I have heard from you that the reason that she's wrong on that is because number one piece of evidence, she identifies as a progressive. Right?
Yes.
That's getting into the argument about whether progressive and centrist are mutually exclusive. I assume you don't want to go down that route again. And piece of evidence number two is she at one time she had this statement about when I started, I was just a centrist in college going to class and look at how much everything changes in 18 months, which could be interpreted. You don't want to hear this argument. You said, don't don't talk to me about this. So the other interpretation of the argument is what's changed is her position as an influencer and the circumstances of the pandemic, as opposed to her political philosophy.
No, that's not a reasonable. There's no reason for her to say.
Why is it unreasonable?
18 months ago, at the start of the pandemic, I was a centrist from blah, 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 blah. How much things can change. What was the point of injecting centrist in there? Obviously, she's distancing herself from that label. Obviously.
No, she could just be like, oh, that's all I was just like a regular centrist Democrat in classes and stuff like that. It's not apparent to me that that this necessarily implies a kind of ideological shift. Maybe it does. I'm just saying it's not the only plausible reason.
I think it's well, no, I think she's obviously whatever. I'm not going to fight you on that, but she is okay. So Taylor is wrong because Olivia explicitly rejects the label of centrist, which is actually the more important point, and also self-identifies as progressive currently. So she's just wrong. Okay. That's not open for debate.
And her example of rejecting it is when she said 18 months ago, I was just a centrist in classes, and now look at whatever she said there. That's her rejecting the label.
Yes, right? Obviously.
So what do you say about her in terms of the following statement? Taylor didn't see that.
That's her job. Are you kidding me?
Wait.
She's the reporter. Hang on. If you're going to use the word centrist, you should go to the person's Twitter feed. You should look at what they're about. You should search for the word centrist. You should search for the word progressive. You should do your fucking job. It's not good to be like, oh, okay, so what you're saying is maybe it was just bad reporting. Okay, I will concede. Maybe it was just bad reporting. Sure, fine.
You're making the argument that, okay, so there's a couple of explanations that I think that you need to go down is like, either we're hanging our hat on progressive and centrist on Taylor's view being contradictory, or that she knowingly ascribed her, in order for her to be wrong insofar as, and it shows that she's lying, she would need to knowingly misidentify or mislabel her when she knew, right? She knew that she wasn't a centrist, and she called her it anyway. And that point, I think, is that's like an issue that I didn't want to get into. And the reason I didn't get into is because she could just be like, I didn't see that. All right, she can, and exactly what she did, which is like, okay, if she wants to update it, I will. If it's wrong, that's exactly what she did. And so it's not useful as a point unless you're already bought into the fact that she sucks. It doesn't advance anywhere because she could just plausibly claim, and unless you already think that she's a piece of shit, be like, oh, I didn't see that. I guess I'll update it. I thought that she was a centrist. That was my understanding. So it's not effective. That's what I'm saying.
There's a concept of like malicious negligence. So, is it possible that Taylor just didn't think to look up her Twitter feed to see if she needed to update her priors or her politics changed over time? Like, sure, but she made a choice to do that. And I think she made a choice to do that because she was already fond of that label for a different reason. She was using that label to smear Olivia Giuliani.
That's the conclusion we're trying to show. That's the conclusion.
That's what I'm saying. I showed that. That was 100% on display. Yes, I showed that.
You showed that because of the use of the term afterwards on her Twitter feed. I agree with that part. What I don't think shows it is disputing the actual factual accuracy, even on the self-ID concept and the other concept that she threw around.
How? Wait, pause. How? What do you mean? The self-ID?
No, you didn't show that she was lying. That when she wrote centrist, she knew it was untrue of Olivia Giuliani.
Well, what would you call it if you're doing a piece of reporting and you specifically use that language? Like that was not an accident. You specifically use that language, and then you don't make any effort to go to the person's like Twitter feed to see if maybe their politics have changed in the last fucking 5 years when we're talking about like a 12-year-old, you know what I mean? Like
you're asking me a question. I mean, the claim is for you to substantiate, did she lie or not? You're just asking me a question.
That to me is a form of dishonesty. It is a lie. Yes, I think so. Yeah. I believe
it's a lie to do
especially when Taylor called Giuliani a progressive fucking a year before the article came out. Like, yes.
Again, that's just assuming the thing that we just got into.
What is this? What are you doing? What are you doing? You told me earlier that you don't even dispute the fact that she was being bad faith. What are we doing? Why are you doing this?
We're talking about the actual inferences.
Why are you doing this?
Of how you're asking me why I'm doing these. So by the way, you're asking me why I interjected. I'm explaining why are we doing
this right now? You're like forcing me to, you're trying to nitpick me on every single, it could have been this, it could have been that, could have been this, but you already agreed that she was being bad faith. So why are you doing this?
That's the conclusion. But
you agree, right?
I agree with the conclusion. I don't agree with all the inferences that you're laying out. I don't agree with all of the reasons behind the conclusion.
So what? Tell me what,
some of them, but not all.
Well, tell me what you think.
Asked me, right? So I'll explain to you why we're in the middle of this conversation.
No. I want to skip that part. I want to skip that part. I want you to tell me what you mean. What you mean when you say that Taylor Lorenz was being bad faith. What do you mean by that?
Because I think it's obvious that in her lexicon, she uses centrist to refer to be a pejorative, and based on her track record of doing so, and that it's not plausible, given what she claimed and professed the meaning of the term was, which is Democrat aligned. It's not a plausible thing to call out her Olivia Giuliana being Democrat aligned, because that would be true of like literally anyone affiliated with the Democratic Party. So given her stated view that what she means by centrist is Democrat aligned, it would not be of note to say that Olivia Giuliana is centrist on that meaning of the word. So that's why I think that she.
What does it mean to say it would not be of note? What does that mean?
In other words, it's superfluous. It's redundant, right? It's like saying an unmarried bachelor, right? If you say an unmarried bachelor, it's redundant. So you're like, wait, why are you saying something that's so trivial? What other plausible reason would you have for saying something like the Democratic aligned centrists, by which I mean Democratic aligned, if you're not using that term when you have a track record of using it as a pejorative? That's why I think it's useful to get to the semantic and the emptiness of her stated usage of that word. And that's effectuated by asking her, hey, what do you mean by this word? And she says, I mean Democratic aligned. And, oh, really? That's what you meant? Then why even say that of Olivia Giuliana?
Did she use the word?
Do you understand?
No. You're telling me kind of in a sense what it isn't, but I'm saying what is it? So like, did she use the word specifically to paint Giuliana as a villain?
As DNC villain, yes.
And
yes.
What are we doing? The conclusion. Then why are we doing all this?
You asked me, why are we doing this?
Yes.
So Hutch, you asked me, why are we doing this? Yes. I started to explain, like, I don't want to get into this. So are you asking me, do you want me to give an answer for why we're doing this? Or do you not want me to answer that question?
Why are you nitpicking the most meaningless things when you already agree that she did it for a specific reason and it was dishonest?
Because you asked me, so I'll answer that. The reason why we're going down this train is because you asked me why I interjected. And why I interjected has to do with your method of reasoning, not your conclusions. And so obviously to analyze your method of reasoning, we need to get into your reasoning. And that involves criticizing it. And so that's why we're getting into it, is because that's why I interjected. And you wanted to inquire as to why I did it. Right? Wait, why is that unbelievable? That's exactly how we got here.
Like, if I imagine you having a conversation with fucking Rob Noor or whatever, and he comes on Live and Learn, and you ask him a question, and he debate bros himself into the most ridiculous thing possible. Like, I personally would not, like, if I thought that you had like a better point to make, or you had already belabored the point, it was time to move on to something like that, maybe I would interject and be like, okay, do you have another like descriptor that you want to go with? I would never in a million years jump in to like offer Rob Noor a lifeline and start like nitpicking your debates.
I'm not offering, my intent wasn't to offer a lifeline. I'm telling you that's not what I was trying to do.
In effect, that's what happened. In fact, there were multiple times throughout that conversation where she was like, you would interject and say something, and I would be like, hang tight, Pisco. And she'd be like, really? you can't even answer. She would be like, you can't even answer that.
Wait,
that's
it's your claim that you demolished her and that you dismantled her. So
she was clinging onto the things that you were saying. And so she was like, oh, it's funny how you don't want to do that. So she was definitely like clinging to that like lifeboat 100,000%.
Okay.
And she did it every time.
If I'm correct on a point, and if she is clinging on to that.
Well, I don't think but that's the thing.
Right or accurate. Okay.
I don't think you were being correct. Like, I don't think you were correct in those points.
Well, that's going to turn on whether or not I am correct or not, and that's going to involve us talking about it. So,
but that's besides the point.
Why are we in the weeds? Is
the correctness or the incorrectness doesn't matter. Like, I would never interject in a way that was aggressive.
So another way of what you're doing is saying, don't countermand me when I'm closing in on my kill. Right? You're like, because she could cling on to anything I say as a lifeline. Right? Yeah. It's like, don't talk. Why are you talking?
Well, no, not necessarily. Like, I'm not saying just be quiet.
So you're like, you'd be chill if I spoke up to attack her.
No.
Yeah, you just agreed with that framing. That's crazy.
No, you can jump in and interject, and if you think I can sharpen my argument in a different way, that's fine. But don't do the like yes or no thing. And then when I start to give you a nuanced answer, you yes or no, like, what are we doing then? Like, we're just hot. Like now the whole vibe is completely fucked now. Now I'm like dealing with you and I'm like, you know, I got to balance these two things at the same time.
That regardless of whether you're saying, irrespective of whether you're correct, right? You're saying regardless of whether you're correct, don't ask me tough questions when I'm closing in on my kill.
Not in the way that you did. No, definitely not.
And the reason I don't do that is because you why?
You fuck up the whole vibe. You fuck up the whole flow. I had a whole fucking thing.
You had plenty of time, Hutch, and on your own accord.
No, but you're distracting me. You're coming in and you're like yes or no, and I'm not. My brain is very focused on what Taylor is saying, where I'm going with it. I have like a plan. It was very methodical, and now I got like fucking Biden, yes or no, you motherfucker, and then I try to do like the fucking nuanced answer, and you're talking to me like Rob Knorr, you know what I mean? Like I just don't do that. Like if you want to sharpen my argument, just do it in a way that's not so like, because it's distracting as fuck is my point.
Well, listen, I have no, if what you're saying is like, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, just like, don't ask me these questions that I would also ask of.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Of a guest.
I didn't say that. Well, I said the tone. That's just how you do it. Just how you do it. If you're like, Hutch, if you jump in and you're like, Hutch, I don't think you're making the point the best way. If you do that's fine. Like that's direct. That's not going to blow up the conversation.
You don't think
But no, that's not what you did. You do like, yes or no, Biden, did he do the thing? Yes or no?
I'm not saying that's what I did. I'm saying like, so you wouldn't have an issue with that. You wouldn't have an issue being like, okay. It's just specifically like getting you to answer whether Joe Biden is or is not centrist on your own view in a way that by the way, the point I do that is I think it's a quick way to show that, actually, maybe this is like not as clear as I thought. Like maybe this is actually requires, like you said, nuance. And actually, centrist can mean different things in different circles. And so,
but literally just say that.
Be like, well, centrist, progressive. No, I understand, right? Like that's what the question is meant to elicit. And you're saying I'm thrown by that question. That question throws me. So regardless of whether, whatever happens, the question threw me. Well, and so I didn't like the question because of the tone of it.
When you're having interactions with human beings, like the tone of the interaction is going to color what happens. And so when you do the yes or no, it's hostile. And so now I'm dealing with a hostile actor. And I'm also, but that's what it is.
Big leagues though, Hutch. I mean, you're being incredibly hardball on her.
But
right?
You're not Rob Knorr. You know, like I'm
incredibly hardball on people on my side and not on my side. I like you see me like when we're together, just us.
You can be direct. You can be direct without being like overtly hostile. Is the point? You can be direct without like fucking with the vibe and like fucking with the flow. You can just interject and be like, Hutch, respectfully. If you would have just said, Hutch, respectfully, I don't think this is the best way to make the argument. Here's what I would say. But you're like, no, this is fucking stupid. Yes or no?
The kind of question I asked of you. Wait. Do you think the kind of question I asked with you is like inconsistent with the kind of questions you were asking Taylor?
I don't know what that means.
It's consistent with. So the manner in which I approached you is very like the manner you approached Taylor.
No, I was being like, watch it back, bro. I was being kinder and calmer with her than you were with me. You brought in a whole new energy.
That is
you like.
I totally disagree with that characterization.
Really?
You were demanding. You saying you're being evasive. You're avoiding.
No. That was after that. That was after.
You're not answering my question.
That was after that. That was after that. I promise you. I was so composed. I was so composed. She was the one that was flailing. I kept my shit calm and zen. I did that shit consciously. And then I had you coming in like, blah,
that is not how I perceived it. And so if that's the case, I'll rewatch it and see if I think that the manner in which I approached you was inconsistent with the manner you approached Taylor. That was not how I understood it. Now, maybe it is. I could be wrong in terms of how I was remembering it. But you would say if I approached you in the manner that you were approaching Taylor, you wouldn't have a problem from a vibe perspective, right? If it's the case that we were approaching it from similar angles, you to Taylor, me to you.
Ask that question again. There's a lot of moving parts here.
So if it's the case, right? So assume it's the case that the manner in which you were asking and the form of the questions that you were asking Taylor is roughly similar to how I asked it of you. You wouldn't have a vibe-based reason to object to it, correct? Because it would be inconsistent.
No, I think even then,
would be consistent with your vibe.
Why? Mean,
even then,
I think
following the vibe that you're setting for our guests,
host,
I should.
You're like
No,
you were hosts,
but she's our guest, Hutch. Like the usual form in terms of inviting people onto the guest is to treat the guest better than you treat the co-host. That's the usual form.
I fucking did. I was so calm with her. I was so like, I did not like, at any point did you hear, especially when at the point that you jumped in, was the tone that I was using with Taylor, was I doing stuff like, yes or no, Taylor? Yes or no? Like,
I'm not sure if you use the term yes or no.
No,
but you were asking direct questions. Whether you use the term yes or no can't be what this is turned on. Really? Is that really what's going to turn on? Is whether I said yes or no?
It's not about the specific,
whether you did or didn't.
It's not about the specific language. It is like very pointed and hostile.
Grilling her
and hostile.
Yes, like you did, right? Like you did with Taylor.
No.
And I'm not saying that it's wrong.
No. You were more aggro with me than I was with her. 1,000%.
Okay, but I'm asking you, if I was the same amount that you were to Taylor, you'd say it would still be bad, and it would still be bad because that's the guest and you're the co-host. And
in that case, I think it would be bad because
better than the guest.
In that case, I think it would be bad because of that philosophical difference that we have. Because like, if I've established that someone is being bad faith, I'm not gonna jump in that way. Like, if somebody is being bad faith, then quite frankly, they should be grilled. And like, I could have gone a lot harder than I did. I could have gone so much harder. You have heard me go like lose my composure in debates and like scream and yell and do all that stuff. You've seen me do that sometimes. I did not do that with her. I made a specific, deliberate effort to not do that with her. But like, it just strains credulity for me to like, I don't understand the impulse like after someone who has established themselves to be not operating in good faith and being deceptive and being evasive and giving crazy answers, like to redirect that energy towards me and be like da 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 da, you know, like it is like that's very the same, distracting.
Whenever there's a dispute, that's just how I always act, and that's how I always am. And it's
I would take a look at that. That's all I'm saying. I would
okay, but
take a look at that.
Okay, it's not the point that is being raised though is it's not a remarkable thing. It's not like this is a Taylor specific aspect of Pisco. Whenever I have a disagreement on the merits, I assume people are big boys and big girls, and I'm like, hey, do you agree with this? Come on, like everyone knows that, and so it's not trying to throw her a lifeline. It's saying like, hang on, this is like stupid that we're going on the center's point, or on the aspect of are you claiming, for example, this is standard, that this is standard contractual language? Like, that's just a way for me to like, one, I'm frustrated that the conversation is like circling around there, and two, I have my own views. That
was another point, by the way, that confused me. What was that all about?
So that's another point where you might have taken it a different way than I intended it, right? So in that point, she was claiming that, well, I've seen contracts that aren't anything like what you're talking about. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, I've seen contracts where this, yeah. And so what I was trying to do is say, well, hang on a second, Hutch, you're not claiming this is standard, is it? And you were supposed to say, no, I'm not claiming that. I'm just saying this is a plausible reason why compliance, right? Regulatory compliance is a plausible reason. Did you consider that?
Well, I did.
Right?
So
you weren't making the claim that it was standard, but you didn't answer it, right? You were scared to answer it because you were defensive.
No. Pause. You had the wrong read of that situation. I did a superficial Google search about like that kind of language as it applies to 501c4s. I didn't deep dive. Like, that was like towards the end of my prep. Okay. So I didn't find like,
sure, you know, I didn't find like making the claim that it was standard.
No. You have the wrong read still. No. You have the wrong read still. What I discovered was that language actually does appear to be somewhat common in these kinds of structures, but I didn't feel confident enough to like flesh that out. So I was like, well, I don't know. I'll look into it afterwards.
Say, I'm not making that claim right now. I'm not making that claim right now. Right. So all I'm trying to say is she was trying to.
But I think it was. But I think it was, Pisco. You like, why did you jump in here? Like, you're not saying that's standard, right?
You're either making the claim or you're not making the claim. So she was acting as though what she was saying is contradicting you. So you were saying something like, well, this could be a plausible reason. She's like, well, I've seen contracts without it. So instead of being, well, what does that mean? You're going to say like, well, I've seen contracts with it. Right. I'm saying it's her inane point, right? She's saying, well, I've seen contracts that don't include this language, as though that's contradicting what you're saying. What you're saying is that there's a plausible good faith reason, regardless of whether it's standard.
Why not interject there, though? Why not interject there and cut her off?
I did interject, and rather than I think
but why
maybe you
why
thought
not
that I was about to
piggyback
attack you.
What? Wait, hang on. You weren't trying to attack me?
No. Do you understand? What I was doing there is saying, you're not alleging that it's standard, right, Hutch? Are you alleging it's standard? And the whole point of that is to say her claim, well, she's seen other contracts that don't have this language isn't responsive to your point. What's your point? Your point is there's a plausible good faith reading of some of these restrictive clauses. That is to say regulatory compliance, right? And that's not contradicted by her saying, implying that it's standard or non-standard. She is trying to derail, and I'm saying you're not claiming it's standard, are you, Hutch?
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. On this point, what you're saying makes sense. I understand. That makes sense.
And
the other point we disagree. The other point we disagree, but that made a little sense to me.
People can say you're rewriting history. Just look at when it happens in the conversation. I notice that we're about to have an inane conversation about what is in contracts or not when no one has the fucking, including me, by the way, as well. I have no fucking idea what's standard in these contracts. No one here has that information. That's not responsive to Hutch's point. And she's making a non-responsive point, which is, well, I seen a contract that doesn't have it. The proper response is, regardless of whether it's standard or not, isn't that a good faith, reasonable, plausible reason why they would have that? Yeah. That's why I was asking that question.
Okay. Yeah.
But instead, the interpretation is he's sweeping because he asked Hutch a question. He's sweeping for Taylor.
No, my instinct in that moment was like, because you fucking pounced on me like 30 minutes before, I took it as another pounce on me. I'm like, fuck, I'm being interrogated again. And so now I'm in fight mode again.
That's presupposing the first is intended to be a pounce. I understand. Okay. Maybe how I approach it, is really not conducive to good discourse. I mean, maybe or so, but like the whole point of these questions is to make it clear what the claims are. If the claim is that it's factually correct or incorrect, that she's a fucking centrist or moderate, whether you're claiming it's standard, whether you're claiming that the contract says that there's no disclosure, or whether the course of dealing was that there's no enforcement of that provision. Like, I don't understand why we just can't get clarity on the views. And that's what I was trying to do. Most of the time, I didn't interrupt your flow. And a lot of the times you performed beautifully. True. I thought that I wasn't trying to go about, and if I was just trying to do that, I would have interrupted at the most devastating moments when you were absolutely destroying her on the Israel point. And I didn't do that because you were cooking.
Okay. Well, listen, I gotta get going here pretty soon. I didn't expect this conversation. Right, this is another one of our patented fucking 3 hours. Listen, I enjoy the conversation. Here, the only thing I ask, like, I am not asking for you to like go easy on me. That's not what I'm saying. I like being directly challenged. I would question sometimes. That's all I'm saying. I would just question sometimes the level of hostility. Maybe just like 4 notches below that would like help. That's all I'm asking. Just, listen, we are who we are, and like you are who you are, and I accept that about you, and so that's like something difficult that might be hard to turn off. Okay, but just I humbly request, as my boy, as your boy, who loves you and is your boy.
Here's I think the solution, right? Here's the solution, because in those contexts in which you don't want me to interrupt, I think it's honestly probably better.
Pause. I didn't say don't interrupt. I didn't say that. You can interrupt. Just 4 notches down in terms of hostility. That's it.
Okay.
I'm okay with you interrupting.
Depending on the context, I think if there's a kind of conversation with a lefty situation like that, where, because I don't think, I'm trying to think, right? Like if this were like a fellow, let's imagine you have John Favreau on, right? And you guys are beefing about this point about Ken Martin. I'm not sure you'd feel the same way about me being like, hang on, Favreau, do you agree that Favreau, what he's saying here is like objectively demonstrative reality, whatever you want to say? Yes or no, Hutch? Would you take the same kind of umbrage? Is it any guess, or is it the fact that this is Taylor? This is like the big white whale. She is a particular person, and she's an enemy. Is there like a added oomph to it that it's like, it's the Taylorness of it all? It's the Lorenz of it all. It's the Ogre Boy, if we had him on, of it all. Even though you'll remember, right? You'll remember in the Ogre Boy conversation where you have a lefty and a Vadim conversation, I was totally on board in defending you every moment where I thought it was appropriate.
It's honestly
not demonstrated myself.
It's honestly not about the interlocutor. It's not the Taylor Lorenz of it all or the John Favreau of it all. It's the yes or no of it all.
Okay. It's the yes or no of it all.
It's specifically that, like literally specifically that, like the yes or no thing. Because you force your brain to go into a different kind of mode. Like if you're having a conversation that's really complex and then you get hit with a yes or no, like when you're in that place, it is like distracting, and it does feel like more than just a assertive or even slightly aggressive like questioning, which I'm okay with. It takes on a new level of like hostility that is like hard to. It's a distraction in the moment.
that's my brand, I guess, to the extent that it's like hostility. It's my brand, man. and I do
Your
that.
brand is hostile.
Josiah, do you remember the conversation we had with the Vanguard?
Yes.
Where, yeah, like, I had said something about what Josiah said. I'm like, that's not what they mean or something. And he was fuming about it.
Yeah.
It's not a particular thing to you or to, like, it just, and maybe listen, I'm open to all sorts of
I don't take it personally.
Constructive feedback about communication, but like I just promise you it's not my intent to give Taylor Lorenz a parachute, because if I wanted to do that, I trust me, I could have done it way more effectively than I did, and I'm not winning any favors by taking the view that Chorus is based and agreeing with you with a lot of the substance of the framing criticism that I do. Like, if I just wanted to appeal to that audience, I would read the room over there and be like, Chorus is dark money is shit, these people are all being paid. And I don't do that, right? And I also don't go and, however, and say that there's nothing valuable about the article. Same manner, by the way, that I approach the H3 lawsuits, same manner that I approach the Hassan Piker, global entry thing. Same manner.
I've never accused you of grifting.
I take the views I do because okay.
I've never accused you of grifting. I internally don't think of it that way, because I do see, okay. I think you're a complicated guy, and I do think that, like, I think there's something more primal in you. Like, when that comes out of you, I do see it as like an autonomic kind of thing that comes out, and
that's usually because I'm frustrated. If I'm being honest, like it's not this big thought out meta thing. It's like I'm frustrated. I'm like, oh fuck, and then I say something. So like a lot. I don't think that you're generally off there, where it's like it's a kind of more internal dissatisfaction or disquieting, where I have to sometimes I have to hold myself back. Remember on the Tim Miller podcast where Miller's like, in an ideal world, I would do Jared Polis, and I literally had to stop myself from, like, I rolled my eyes, and then I later brought it up.
I was thinking about you
in the moment. I was like, what's that?
I was thinking about you when he was saying those things. I was like, ooh, Pisco's.
I held myself back because sometimes there's just like, I want to just give my opinion and stuff. And so, and this is a very different context where I feel very liberated in these moments to like offer opinions and stuff. Very different from like some of the times in practice, for example, where you shouldn't be like showing your face on your sleeve, your heart on your sleeve. You shouldn't be like indicating visibly where you are and just like jumping at the bit. So sometimes my steady state, my natural state, it is this kind of like swelling of passion sometimes. But that might be like harder to tamp down sometimes, but it also means that I'm not. I appreciate it. Yeah, you as well. You give me a boner. Anyway,
that's what that means. You know what's complicated here, and I don't even mean to make this complex. I'm not even saying never do yes or no with me, because like I'm fucking down for that sometimes. But like in that kind of a setting, the yes or no thing was distracting. Like if I'm confronted in that kind of way, but like I'm not saying never ever do it, but in that
when you do,
setting,
then it's probably better that like when you're in those zones, for me not to involve myself. Like if there's this. I think I'm just going to interrupt your flow then. I think, listen, if there's a moment where you want to cross-examine people and do some, I'm not saying that
it's only 100 miles per hour or like nothing with you. You can't go like 40 miles per hour.
No. I'm happy to, like communicate in a way that I think is conducive with everything that's going on. But when I feel that there's like evasiveness, I can be like a dog chasing cars. I just like, wait a second, why can't we just clarify this? And it drives me crazy sometimes.
I know that about you.
And I also, yeah. But like, I feel like you sometimes resent the clarity or resent the shining the light so we can see all the internal parts.
If it's 100 miles per hour, sometimes it's a bit much. But I would never ask you to like,
I'm willing to work with you.
Not be the way that you are. Just at a lower volume.
Maybe it's
just a slightly lower volume.
If I have like a talking stick or something, I can like use it whenever I'm like.
You know what? This is good. I mean, this is good. This is like therapy stuff. You know what would be, dude? You know what would be funny?
Yeah.
Like literally,
what
if we could, bro? This would be great content. Like, what if we literally hired a therapist that would be willing to do therapy for us?
Malpractice, dude. No way.
Wait, can you not do like, televised therapy?
What is it? Didn't someone get fucked up with that?
Or what if it doesn't have to be a therapist? Like, what if it was like, what if we hired like a team building,
like a coach, like a life coach?
Yeah, like a
team.
I think that would be funny.
All right, sure. Like we should look into it, and we'll crowdfund it. We'll be social worker for Hutch and Pisco.
I think maybe you can do live stream therapy. I don't know if that breaks the ethics.
Can you? I don't know. I just remember there being like some controversy about it. I don't really remember what was the result of it. I thought someone got in trouble.
Well, yeah, Dr. K does stuff, but he's very careful to say it's not therapy. But I don't know if that means you can't do it ever. But maybe not. I don't know.
I'm afraid of, so this owlishness says Pisco's afraid of being diagnosed with autism for real.
Do you think you're autistic?
I do think, no.
Okay.
No, I think that autism is characterized by much more severe forms of like antisocial behavior and not understanding of social cues ever. And I don't think that's characterized as me. And I think people, if you met me, we did this thing in New York, like a bar crawl when we were doing the DNC stuff, where I think anyone who would have seen me in that format would have seen me like how normie I can be in real circumstances and, buying people drinks, just having regular conversations. So I do think that it's not accurate to say that I'm autistic, but as
people
conflate language, I don't think it's that
people
bad.
Conflate autism with just being intensely focused on something sometimes, but that could apply to like 1,000 pathologies or just dispositions or whatever. A therapist may live stream a session only if all parties give explicit informed written consent.
Oh, we can do that.
State consent laws permit it. The therapist's professional ethics allow it.
Shit.
I'm just saying that could be funny. I'm gonna go. I'm fucking hungry, but hey, listen, I enjoyed the.
I'm gonna log off too. But hey, guys, follow Hutch at Hutch, and what's your Twitter too?
Hutchinson, just the Hutchinson.
We need to get Soy Pill's Twitter back because that's actually detrimental to Live and Learn. Because I think that like we all share the load of trying to get guests and stuff, and we all give different ideas. But Soy Pill does a significant amount of reach out as well. And he used to do it through his Twitter. Yeah. I think it's been like materially bad that he doesn't have his Twitter. I think that's
I think he's got somebody's got a new Twitter going for him. Certainly not him. I think he does.
I
don't know. We'll text him and ask him. But okay. Well, listen. Enjoy. What day is it? Wednesday. Enjoy Hump Day, buddy.
It is, dude. I love Hump Day. Love it. Okay. But no, appreciate you, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Cheers.